belt, better, chalk, butter, chalk, chest, cup, fan, fork. All these words come from Latin. And as influences started changing English, we have four dialects coming up: Kentish, West Saxon, Mercian, Northumbrian. Then we have the Middle English period, 1066 to 1500. England emerging as a distinct nation, domination of Roman Catholicism, trade, Oxford University established. A pandemic then too called Black Death, which reappeared in 1362, 1367, 70, kept changing English. Corruption of the church, Reformation, Renaissance. Wycliffe's Bible translation changed English. So Middle English kept moving on towards modern English. That's between 1475 and 1630 when the printing press was invented. The most important thing that happened to English during this time was the great vowel shift. You have the long vowels. You have might, you have meat, you have mate, may, a, e sound mate. All this happened to English. Bible influences, let there be light, the prodigal son, my brother's keeper. Shakespeare changed English. A huge vocabulary, he had 34,000 words, and he gave 2,000 new words. The Elizabethan age, science and technology, trading, all gave new words into our English. During the period, a number of sets of vowel sounds that had formerly been distinct became identical, while their spelling distinction was largely maintained. So what happened was the spelling remained, but the pronunciation changed. There are more changes. For example, the initial K and G ceased to be pronounced before N. Knight became night, gnaw became gnaw, as did initial W before right. Final B and G ceased to be pronounced after nasal sound. Lamb, hang, lamb, hang. We do not do that anymore. So similarly, changes happen. So sometimes I remember one of my professors telling me, Gorty can be fish because GH is F in rough, O is E in women, and TI is churn section. So that much of disparity happened in English language. Spelling remained, but pronunciation changed. Now, what's the late modern English period, 1800 to the present age? Industrial Revolution, British Empire, adopted words, science, nuclear, oxygen, vaccine we have. Technology gave us engine, electricity, telephone, and a lot of loan words. 300 years from then, 80% of people outside England started speaking in English. The motive was profit from the colonized countries. Easy for the colonized to learn English rather than the colonizer learning the multiple languages. There was order, and because of that, political unity, Creoles got created. You have African, American, Indian, New Zealand colonies coming up. You have political correctness, words in English language to be correct and express yourself, feminism, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, lot of innovations. Pandemic will bring changes. So within 5 minutes, I move on to my main topic. But the pandemic will still change language broadly construed. It will bolster the longevity of its diversity. Most of us live in a home where English is not the mother tongue, but yet English has had its changes. What will happen to English during this COVID-19 period when everyone gets back? We have millions of families that have been locked in. Now, reality has physical dimensions. Dynamic coherence is a requirement of social life. Social reality emerges through language. And if there is a change in language, there is going to be a change in civilization too. Therein lies the power of discourse. So we have the digital generation, online existence, newspapers, journals, diaries, ebooks, natural disasters, and now a pandemic. Diseases did change vocabulary earlier too. We had the yellow fever, we had the Spanish influenza, now reduced to Spanish flu, poliomyelitis, that is polio. You have AIDS, SARS, and now we have COVID-19, the new term. Irrespective of what your mother tongue is, there is that word which has overwhelmingly dominated the globe and our language, COVID-19, a shortening of coronavirus disease 2019. So called because they resemble the solar corona. There are many ways in which language has power. The way the people are described by others can directly affect their lives. The disease has altered the lives of billions of people. It has ushered a new vocabulary to the general populace. It encompasses specialist terms, new acronyms and words to express social imperatives. Great social change brings great linguistic change too. These are extraordinary times, and the OED, Oxford, dictionary, lexicographers are busy adding more and more words. Now, many of them had existed earlier, but they became popular during the last 3 months. So, work from home, WFH, working from home, self isolation. This was recorded in 1834, but has become popular now. You have infodemic, a portmanteau word from information and epidemic. The term came in 2003 for the SARS epidemic. The phrase shelter in place, a protocol instructing people to find a place of their own and stay there safely. They occupying until everything is clear. You have social distancing, first used in 1957 and was originally an attitude rather than just a term, referring to an aloofness or deliberate attempt to distance oneself from society. But now it has become part of COVID-19 dialogue. And an elbow bump, along with hand slap and high five, there was an elbow bump to manifest friendship, a way of conveying celebratory pleasure. PPE is now almost universally recognized as personal protective equipment, an abbreviation, and more. We have pestilence, a fatal epidemic or disease, was borrowed from French and then Latin, and it first appears in Wycliffe's Bible of 1382, not long after this first great devastation happened. The related term pest from French peste appeared shortly afterwards. It actually means an insect that infects crops. An annoying person also is called a pest. But now it has become famous because of COVID 19. Earlier, it came into the dialogues because of plague, which is also called black death, because of the black marks that come on the skin after the infection. Pox, from the plural of pock, denoting a pustule or the mark it leaves. It came in 1476 as a term applied to a number of virulently contagious diseases, most especially dreaded the smallpox, first recorded in the 1560s. There is a continued focus of vocabulary around the social and economic impacts of COVID 19. Words that became popular are lockdown, distancing, Zoom, mask, and covering. Millions of people adapted to communicating remotely. References to video chats, Zoom, Google Meet, GoToMeeting are common. In May, now let's see how the progress happened. The first signs of looking ahead to life post lockdown. We have reopen, the phases that come after that, first phase, second phase, third phase, phased return to work, phased reopening and easing of restrictions, measures, easing of the lockdown are keywords of this month. I'm talking about May. Contrast with virtual life and thinking of the restart of face to face interaction. In person has increased in frequency. We have in person worship, in person graduation because they try to ask you, are you coming in person or is it just a copy that you want? Now, what happened in June? The search for effective medical treatments continued. People talked of hydroxychloroquine and dexamethasone. Another word on a recent trend list was teleconsultation. We have telemedicine and telehealth. Now, how did the words come into our daily usage? It started off in April, though the pandemic started spreading in January itself. We became aware only during March, April, May, and June. In April, we have PPE, lockdown, pandemic, ventilator, stay at home, COVID 19, furlough. That is, you are permitted to take leave and stay and work from home. Distancing, coronavirus, N95, Zoom, hydroxychloroquine, quarantine, asymptomatic, COVID, frontline, virus, self isolation, disinfectant, shelter in place, mask, SARS, CoV-2. That's what's spreading now. The second phase we're going through. Non-essential ICU, corona. In May, we have reopen, lockdown, COVID-19, pandemic, COVID, distancing, hydroxychloroquine again, covering, furlough, stay at home, SARS-CoV-2, PPE, phased, quarantine, reopening again, tracer, easing, remdesivir, asymptomatic, mail-in, hornet, coronavirus, antibody, mask, in person. And in June, defund, Juneteenth, brutality, anti-racism, racism, COVID, confederate, looting, covering, kneel, chokehold, statue, reopen, 2 meters, systemic, pandemic, looter, COVID-19, distancing, lockdown, dexamethasone, racial, injustice, asymptomatic, distanced. In UK English, there is a clear preference to the form COVID written in small letters and then 19, while the US prefers COVID written in all capitals and 19 because they say it is a short form. Frontline has a new contextual meaning, the sense of the adjective for frontline worker, the word frontline worker, frontline employee, frontline staff, working at the forefront of an organization's public activities. Such people are given the adjective frontline. There are coinages. Humor is central to many of the corona coinages. The German corona speck playfully refers to stress eating amid stay at home orders. Spanish COVID dieta, we saw in NDTV all the time, COVID diet or COVID diet coming up many times. Corona burra, a play on burra, the word that pokes fun at people disregarding public health advice. Doom scrolling describes a hypnotic state of endlessly reading grim internet news. Blur's Day captures the weakening sense of time when so many days bleed one into the other. You do not know whether it's Monday or Tuesday or Thursday because you're at home for a long time and you're not looking at the calendar. We have abbreviations like QOS for quarantine, SANI for sanitizer. Queer and black communities, so often a wellspring of linguistic, influences, have brought about Ms. Rona to refer to corona disease. What will survive? Linguists believe that many of the terms currently in vogue won't endure. The ones with a stronger chance of sticking around post pandemic times will be the ones which we keep using every day, or the ones that give lasting behavioral changes, such as Zoom bombing, photo bombing, and describes the practice of invading someone else's video call. So, my corona agenda means asking to be patient as your plans have all changed and disrupted and you're planning a new schedule. So that's it. That's what I wanted to pass on about the linguistic changes during corona times. It also tries to tell us that it is not going to be the end of linguistic changes in English. English, being a global language, has kept on changing all through these times. I started my introduction because this is a multicultural group and language means culture. And culture changes as and when language changes, and language changes as and when culture changes. They are always influenced by each other. And just like English grew because of Latin influence, because of Julius Caesar tried to invade Britain just to teach the Britons a lesson. And when French people ruled England for 200 years, and then when the Angles and Saxons ruled England, language keeps on changing. It is never static. It keeps on changing. And those language buffs are always interested in the way linguistics change, or how English language, if I have to talk only about the phonology of English, because I'm a teacher of English, how English changes. It's a wonder to see how these changes happen. And it's so interesting to have new words in your conversation and to continue your dialogue. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. I would like to know if you would like to have clarifications. I think I have stuck to time.
Ma'am, you are mute. Ma'am.
I can't hear.
Ma'am, you are mute.
Have I have unmuted.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, dear Neela.
Thank you, Professor Sangeeta.
Oh, that's really good. Your presentation was, I don't know, I don't have words to express. It was that good. I would have just I would have loved to go on listening to it. because I believe that we speak a lot about healthcare, we speak a lot about other effects of COVID, but
Yes.
it's very rare that we talk about language.
Language.
And over here, when we speak of language, I would just like to make a mention that
Okay.
with the change and with the kind of millennial effects that we have on language,
Yes,
I
sir.
find that language was already undergoing a sort of depression. You know, when we talk
Mhm.
about economic depression, we talk about some kind of flaxity in terms of other sectors. I find that even language was undergoing some time kind of a trouble
Yes.
with more of social media. I could see youngsters going in for shorter terms. You know,
Yes.
the SMS kind of language,
Yes.
the WhatsApp kind of languages. So what I thought is this was a good coming back for the
Yes.
English language, and English certainly would be doing a good job even
Thank you,
after
ma'am.
this. And for the good presentation you made, I think the questions have to be taken up in the end.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
No problem, ma'am.
Okay, we'll just take the questions in the end. I would like to invite our next speaker to make her presentation. K.A. Varuni Madhubhashini. Is Madhubhashini there? Yeah? Is Madhubhashini there? Hello? Hello? Shailaja, is Madhubhashini there?
Yes,
Varuni
ma'am.
Madhubhashini, yeah. Madhubhashini is a research assistant from the Institute of National Security Studies, Sri Lanka, and she'll be talking on the effectiveness of public services, how to enhance resilience to future pandemics. Now, being a teacher of political science, we keep talking a lot about public services, we talk a lot about administration and the effect of the same in the society due to all these things. And the pandemic certainly would be a talk I'm looking forward to. So without wasting any further time, just requesting Varuni Madhubhashini to go ahead with her talk. Yeah.
Hello, am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Ma'am, there's a small issue. Still, I'm trying to recover my network issue. Could you please give me a little bit time to
Yes, yes.
solve my?
Same here, same here. I had logged out from one device, so I logged in from the other. I may probably get back to the previous one, so I'm also going to take some time. Maybe a minute or so. Yeah, a minute would do. Yeah.
Shall I? Shall I come as a last presenter?
Okay.
Because still I cannot open my video or whatever.
Okay. Please get that done. Can we have the other
Uh,
speaker now? Sampurna Goswami. Is Sampurna Goswami present here?
Yes,
Sampurna
ma'am.
Goswami, yeah. Assistant Professor, Sukanta College, University of Calcutta, and Associate Fellow Honors at Kalinga Institute of Indo-Pacific Studies. Sampurna Goswami is going to speak on redefining security in the COVID era, perspectives from Global South. We're just looking forward to you, Sampurna, to come up with very good points and help us out know more about how the security issues would get handled in the present COVID era. Just going over to Sampurna. Yeah, you can go ahead. Sampurna, I think you have to unmute. You have to unmute yourself.
Ma'am,
You have to
she is
unmute. Yes.
unmuting.
No, you cannot be heard. You cannot be heard.
Am I audible now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to the organizers for inviting me to speak in this August gathering. Although the gathering is virtual, but then still it's always good to see people safe, and that researchers from various corners of the globe are coming together to discuss numerous issues that is currently uh, going on in these tensing times. Now, My topic for today's discussion is redefining the concept of security in COVID era, and I would certainly take up the perspectives from the global south. Now, before going on to the idea of how the pandemic has changed, or rather, I would say has added on to the existing notions of security, it is very important to understand that what exactly security denotes when it comes to the idea of global south. Now, the orthodox thinking on security essentially defines the connotation in terms of, say, territorial integrity, protecting the state sovereignty, or protecting the nation and the population from external aggressions and violence. In other words, it is basically the protection of the country and the nation and the people. On the contrary, there is also a new thinking on security, and that is much broader in terms. And when I talk about broader aspect of security, then that actually includes say security in terms of economy, security in terms of environment, in terms of health, and as well as human rights. In other words, if state-centric notion, that is military sense of security, which is essentially which essentially enhances the role of state. So if we keep the state-centric notion and position it at the middle, then above it lies the global consequences, the external threats, the global threats, and below it lies the internal dimensions, below it lies the human security perspectives, below it lies the economy, the livelihood, sustainable development. But beyond this particular model, there lies two other threats that should essentially be placed outside the global consequences and the internal dimension, and that is the environmental threat, and second comes the bio threats, or the threats that arises out of biological hazards. Now, coming on to the idea of global south security dilemma. Now, I suppose we all know about Muhammad Ayub, who is a very popular columnist and a third world scholar. Now, Muhammad Ayub argues that global south, or the third world security dilemma, cannot be explained adequately by the old or the new thinkings on security. This is because the potential threat within the global south is inextricably linked with the idea of the ongoing process of state formation, because it is important to understand that most of the nation states that come within the global south are newly independent. They are very nascent participants in the global system or in the global politics. Many Western scholars, however, argues that third world security dilemma is more internal rather than external. Well, however, this is not always the truth. This is only a Western imposed conception. The internal dimension of security that is often used to explain the third world security dilemma is actually a Western construction. Why I say so is because global south has always remained a theater of first world experimentation. For instance, until 1940s and 1950s, global south was a theater of West's imperial expansion and domination. Colonial experimentation with the drawing of third world cartography has given rise to fractured frontiers by dividing countries along lines of ethnicity, along lines of religion and kinship. With the wave of decolonization, global south again became a space of Cold War geopolitics, whereby undue interferences of United States and Soviet Union defined the period. Since 1990s, global south provided the stage for the expansion of American hegemony by compelling nation states to comply with the terms of globalization through structural adjustment programs and grants in aid. Eventually, Global South became the dumping ground of first world commodities and services. Moreover, bringing these countries under the WTO regime uh, with an idea of one size fits all was an attempt to drain out the raw materials from Global South for the development of the Global North, and in return, use the Global South as a market in return of higher profits. Uh, I would again like to bring in another connotation of security when it comes to Global South, and that is again driven by the Western conception. I would not really argue it as Western conception, rather, I would say it is driven by the Western nation states. That is, the already existing conflicts and dissensions that existed within and amongst the Global South countries provided a ground for the West, the first world nations, to sell arms and ammunition. This is something we have seen in cases of India-Pakistan conflict. We have seen in cases of India-China conflict, where the international community have never really tried to kind of give an outcome, or rather I would say to give us a strategy whereby these conflicts could have been mitigated. So in other words, the already existing political turmoils within the Global South has actually helped in maintaining the West's defense manufacturing units. Now, these circumstances, in combination with the already problematic political scenario within the Global South countries, has increased the disparity amongst the various classes and communities within these nation states. For instance, on the economic front, globalization has resulted in a situation where the rich has become richer and the poor has become poorer. Moreover, the wave of privatization scraped off all possibilities of creating an egalitarian society that could have been achieved by providing economic benefits and rewards. On issues of global environmental concerns, again, by bringing the Global South countries under various climate change regimes, the Global North countries had actually impeded the process of development, industrialization, and further growth in this part of the world. Thus, we can say that the peripheral parts within the peripheral part of the globe, that is the South within the Global South, or to be more specific, the marginal communities within the Global South are the worst victims of the Western constructions of development, Western constructions of growth, and Western constructions of security. Now, coming on to the onset of pandemic. Well, I would argue that COVID-19 has not really changed the ideas of third world security. Rather, I would say that it has only added on to what had already existed as a definition of third world security dilemma. Now, COVID-19 pandemic from December 19 last year left most of these scholars, and I would say from almost all disciplines, into a frenzy. What's the future? Is this the end of globalization? Is this the beginning of a new world order? Is this a new world that will witness the rewind of the pre-globalization era, where borders were sealed, where cross-border population movement was a distant dream? Well, I would argue that none of these reservations or none of these, say, uncertainties are valid. COVID-19 pandemic will not end globalization. Neither will it debar people from crossing the borders, and that is quite persistent and quite visible when we look at the tensing time, especially post May. We are seeing that how people are actually traveling across borders even in these tensing times. So globalization has not ended. So what I would say is that globalization will remain. So will its fallacies. It might only divulge itself in newer forms. Thus, the post-COVID era will witness new multitudes of global North countries where most of these Western nations will race minded in pharma diplomacy, and that is something we have already seen. We have seen how India as a country has actually enhanced its soft power capabilities by exporting hydroxychloroquine. So pharma diplomacy will be a new normal in the post-COVID era. Again, there is another factor that comes in. That is the race for acquiring patents of vaccine. This is again something very important. Although we are still uncertain whether any of the vaccine will ultimately succeed or not. But if one succeeds, then there will be a race to get the patents. So in other words, what I'm trying to argue actually is that the north-south divide will not really change. The north-south divide will continue. Now, there is again this idea of imposing the Western constructions of security. For instance, in the initial stages of the pandemic, when Europe and the Americas were devastated by the virus, the international organizations like the World Bank, the IMF, they were still busy to construct a reality whereby they argued that the worst impact of the pandemic will fall upon the global south. Well, there is no place for argument that this is true, given the infrastructural backwardness or the socio-economic fabric of most of the global south countries. But then again, this is partially true. The ways in which most of the underdeveloped global south countries have combated the virus is commendable. Best examples could be drawn from the countries of the Southeast Asia. Yet the West's attitude of constructing and thereby imposing realities continue even in the COVID era. Coming on to the questions of security. As I've already mentioned, that it has not really changed the definition of the third world security, but has only added onto it. To a large extent, security now is a combination of human security aspects and social constructivism in the backdrop of third world security perspective. Now, I have already to some extent given an idea of what exactly the third world security dilemma is. But what I have not given is the social constructivism. What exactly is social constructivism? Social constructivism is basically a theory, and I suppose many of us might be knowing about this, where society constructs the potential threat. Now, if you look at the third world or the global south countries during the COVID times, you'll see that there is a growing psychosocial dilemma regarding COVID patients. And this is arising out of social problems like illiteracy or poverty. This is further dampening the social fabric of these countries. In other words, COVID patients are now considered as potential threat for majority of the population. This, in fact, is unfolding into, or rather, I would say this is seen through the social unacceptance of COVID patients even after that they are getting cured. And in many cases, if you see in the interior villages, COVID patients are being subjected to potential threat. On the arena of human security, again, I'm coming on to the ideas of human security here, because the underdeveloped health infrastructure is failing to provide adequate healthcare facilities to the COVID patients on one hand. Secondly, now there are emerging consensus within the global south countries that there is a need to provide basic income to the marginal populations, free ration, food security. These are again certain aspects of security that are emerging in the COVID era. But then what I feel is that the worst victim of the COVID pandemic is not really the marginal population in the global south countries. Rather, it is the lower and the upper middle class people. Why I'm telling you is that the upper and the lower middle class families are that particular class who are bereft of any social security schemes that are provided by most of the governments. And on the other hand, the wave of privatization, the wave of liberalization that actually provides employment opportunities nowadays, these are the two factors that has made the situation, or that has made the fate of rather I would say that has worsened the fate of the middle class population, because most of the middle class people are now losing their jobs. Who will give them economic security? Because they do not come under the social security benefits. Look at the plight of the condition of the plight of migrant laborers in India. We have all witnessed how the deplorable condition of the migrant laborers. So there again comes the fact that the notion of ensuring security to the marginal population is now shifting more towards providing security to the middle classes. To add on to these internal dimensions, it is again important to state here that COVID-19 or the pandemic has not ended the global or the external notions of security. Because if we look at the Chinese expansion, the aggression, we'll see that COVID-19 or the COVID pandemic has actually given them an opportunity, not really China, but there are many other countries, even North Korea to some extent. The pandemic has given them an opportunity to expand their aggressive tendencies and policies. On the other hand, if we look at the ideas of diplomacy, nothing has changed. Because if we look at the peace deals, the Afghan peace talks, we have seen the Bahrain-Israel talks. We have also seen how in the Indo-Pacific, military logistics pacts are being signed, naval bases are being, or the naval capabilities are being increased. So geopolitical ambitions are still intact. So external notions of threat has not altered in the COVID pandemic era. At the same time, it is also important to state here that besides the global consequences, within the internal dimension, again, identity has come into question, because we have seen how COVID-19 has given rise to a renewed phase of anti-racist movements. We have seen how individuals have been targeted, how communities have been targeted for violating lockdown norms in many global south countries. So identity question has again come into the fore when it comes to the pandemic time. Here I would like to state that closure of borders, this is something which the pandemic has again brought into. Why closure of borders? Because, quote unquote, people from the neighboring countries are carrier of virus. This has become a construction. This is how the society has constructed immigrants. Well, immigration has always remained a security threat for, say, Europe, even for countries in South Asia. But today, besides immigration, we have another major problem, and that is carriers of virus. So within the constructivism, within identity politics, threat has been added on to identity. And this threat is nothing but the carrier of virus. So therefore, to conclude, I would say that pandemic originated as an external threat, and that was mooted in the orthodox idea of state-centric notion of security. It then gradually evolved into internal security dilemma by bringing in the ideas of human security, social stigmatization, social constructions of threat. And in order to address these internal dilemmas, states were compelled to implement the ideas of closed borders besides addressing the external threats ensuing from global changes, thereby going back to the ideas of state-centric notions of territorial integrity, protection of sovereignty, protection of borders, and also constricting cross-border movement of people. In other words, the new notions of security in the COVID era can be defined as an amalgamation of human security from fear as in violence, external threat, fear in terms of life, right to life, health, and freedom from want, that is economic security, food security, within the broader perspectives of orthodox notions of state-centric security. this is where I conclude my presentation, and this is what I think the pandemic has given rise to or has added on to the ideas of security. Thank you.
Sangeeta ma'am, you are not audible.
Oh, hello. Yeah. Now I can be heard? Yes? I think
Yeah, ma'am, yeah.
Sampurna has touched upon a lot of topics, and she's brought in the security issue in a very holistic manner. Sampurna, I think I thank you for that. But I think, dear, you exceeded your time, and you were, I believe, overwhelmed by the presentation. It was a very good presentation. There were people who were commenting. Quite a few participants who were commenting on a presentation, which again can be done probably in the end. We would just like to hear all of them. The next speaker over here is Tejbir. I don't know whether Varuna Madhubhashini, are you ready? Varuna Madhubhashini? Can we have her? Because she had a problem with her connection, I think. There was a problem with the connection. Varuni is there, but I can't see her. And then we have Takbir Kaur. Takbir Kaur is here. Is Takbir Kaur? Shailaja, Aruna, could you just check whether Takbir Kaur is there? Sampurna, I think you touched upon a lot of things, and I'm just waiting to ask certain questions to you without taking much of the time of the participants, because I would also like the participants to interact over here. The jingoistic ideals, the xenophobic ideals that are very soon going to surmount the world. This is something which we all need to take care, and security issues certainly is going to play a major role. Do we have more speakers?
Ma'am, actually, Takbir ma'am was here, but I guess due to some technical problem, she left the meeting.
Okay, so Takbir and Varuni Madhubhashini, is she there? Varuni Madhu, I can see her actually. I can see her.
Varuni ma'am is here. Varuni ma'am is here.
Yeah, so is she going to present? Is she making a presentation? Just find out. Varuni, can you hear us? Because she'll be the, I think, the last speaker. If Takbir Kaur is not there, and if we do not have Rahima, then we'll have.
Ma'am, Takbir Kaur will join very soon. I will call her.
Okay.
Hello.
She was there.
Yeah, Varuni. I think Varuni is making an attempt to speak there. Okay. We'll just listen.
Okay.
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yeah, Varuni, are you Varuni speaking?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just speak a little about you. K.A. Varuni Madhubhashini, she's a research assistant from the Institute of National Security Studies, Sri Lanka. We welcome you, Varuni. And she'll be speaking on the topic effectiveness of public services, how to enhance resilience to future pandemics. So she'll be speaking on the public services, and certainly bureaucracy would be handled over here. So we're looking forward to hearing from you, Varuni. Yeah, you can take over. But please try and stick to the time, because we are anyway running short of time. Please try and stick to the time.
Takbir Kaur will join within 10 minutes. So till that, we can.
Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you. Varuni. You can start. Yeah, you can start. Yeah, please start.
Thank you so much, and I'm really sorry about the technical issues. I would like to meet you in video, but I don't know what.
No, it's okay. You speak. You begin your talk. Even if your video, you have something to share on the screen?
No, ma'am, no.
Okay. Then you can merely speak. Yeah, please speak.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really sorry about the technical issues. That technical issues also we have to experience as a result of this COVID-19 pandemic. I will talk about it later. So, today I'm going to talk about the effectiveness of the grassroots level public services. To resilience, how to resilience the aftermath of the future pandemic. So when it's come to the COVID-19, we have experienced that COVID-19 was the most controversial term which used in the 2020. Especially, no one knows how long this period of coexistence with the viruses will last. But the thing is, the world has vastly different, rather strategic oriented get rid from the pain of the new coronavirus after the lockdown. Especially when it's come to the pandemic, it has strained healthcare systems, it has disrupted the education systems, it has led to joblessness and disrupted social life with the lockdowns. So we have experienced that there are many things have happened as a result of the pandemic. Therefore, COVID-19's more seems to be a gray rhino event rather swan event, which are threats that are very clear and highly obvious but ignored. So as John Allen said, history will be written by the victories of the COVID-19 crisis. Therefore, it is time to understand the real issues which is coming up with the COVID-19, and also each and every government should focus on protecting the people's life rather increasing their power. So when it's come to the Sri Lanka, during the lockdown period, everyone has witnessed there are some lack of effectiveness of the public services, and when it's come to the another time, there are we have increased the effectiveness of the public services. So, but anyway, we have identified that in Sri Lanka, the grassroots level, if not rural area, was highly impacted from the COVID-19. They have had experience to many kinds of economic issues, social issues, and then cultural issues likewise. So when it's come to the Sri Lanka, in the grassroots level, I have categorized there are three particular key peoples which are engaged as a frontline workers to mitigate the threat from the COVID-19. I would like to firstly talk about the GN. We call it Grama Niladhari. It means village officers. And then PHI and MOH, Public Health Inspector and Medical Officer of Health. They are the second in line. And then third group is Samurdi, Development and the Field Officers. Because of these three categories of the officials, and their contribution, Sri Lanka has able to mitigate the threat from the COVID-19. And as according to the Promotion Bureau, as today, we have recorded that the fatality rate in Sri Lanka is 0.39, while the global rate is 5.37. In terms of the recovery rate, Sri Lanka accounts for 94.13%, while the global rate is 52.63. So in Sri Lanka, we have practiced uh, three key thematic areas to respond COVID-19 step by steps to come up this success. I call this is a success which we all gain from the Sri Lankan perspectives, because we have experienced that whole world is battering from the COVID-19 perspectives, but in Sri Lanka we were able to manage it in some kinds of positive level. The secrets and the strategies of the COVID-19 successive story of Sri Lanka, that we were followed three T's. It means testing, treating, and the tracing. So these three thematic areas, there are that which I earlier mentioned. Those three officers were worked as the frontline officers of these three key thematic strategies. It means GNs, PHI and MOH, and Samurdi and the development field officers. When it's come to the GNs, they are the Sri Lankan public official appointed by the central government to carry out administrative duties in Grama Niladhari Division, which is a subunit of a divisional secretariat under the Home Affairs Division of the Ministry of Home Affairs, implement all administrative function of Grama Niladharis performing their duties in 4022 GN divisions under 332 divisional secretariat division all over the world. So during the pandemic period, they closely monitored the pandemic movement right after the first case appeared in the nation, and using human intelligence, Triforces, they have tracked any potential COVID-19 suspects and sent them directly to the quarantine centers. So they are the main guardians which mitigate the threat from the COVID-19 in Sri Lanka. And when it's come to the second key group of the people, they are the PHI and the MOH people. So they have coordinated with public and private institutions, and they went to the from the government GNs. They were able to get to know about where the positive suspect cases are located, and they went to them, and they directed the positive suspected cases into the quarantine centers. So, according with collaboration of the Sri Lankan military forces and the PHI and the MOH, the COVID suspected cases, we were able to mitigate the suspected cases, and we were able to mitigate the spreadness of the COVID-19 viruses. And when it's come to the last group of the people, they are the Samurti and other development and the field officers. So in order to prevent shortage of the essential food supplies, they have introduced various kinds of development project in Sri Lanka. They have motivated the people to focus on the home gardening and focus on self sufficiency, self reliance, like to supply their food shortage by themselves. So these three key pillars have been identified as the main grassroots level officials we should have to strengthen to mitigate the threat from the future pandemic. According to my research, I have been able to came across with different recommendation. This is what I need to highlight through my presentation, because I don't want to discuss about the things what we have done in Sri Lanka to mitigate the threat, but I need to improve the effectiveness of the grassroots level public officials, because we need to prepare for the future pandemic. So these are I would like to looking at the loopholes of the public services to resilience in the aftermath of the future pandemic. So as a recommendation, the public policy framework should be developed with strategical approaches to cater the future vulnerabilities of the economic and social perspectives, whether either it's coming from as an new stage of new coronaviruses, or either it is another humanitarian issue. It doesn't matter. We have to prepare, and we have to specially strengthen the grassroots public level officials to motivate them to be a back shield to protect the people, protect the rural areas people, especially because they have experienced several kinds of difficulties during the pandemic period. So for a recommendation to Sri Lanka, we have experienced that there are different kinds of digitalization and digital equipments infrastructure issues. As a digital infrastructure issues, today I couldn't able to see you couldn't able to see me. So this is what we need to focus. So if we can if Sri Lankan government can increase the digital infrastructure, and if they focus on increase the digital literacy rate of the people, especially these grassroots level people. They would be able to connect with the international community, and they, even during the curfew situation, they would be able to share their experience and then share their information with the government officials and the people with especially with the peoples. So the communication will be continuously happen. So at the time, people can directly talk to their immediate public service officers. So at that time, I believe that we would be able to mitigate the future threat from these kinds of pandemic. And also the another thing is, when it's come to facilitating the personal health protection. So we can develop more public and private partnership to expand existing digital health services. And also we could be able to develop partnership to build digital health skills among all categories of the healthcare staff, to facilitate the uptake and scaling of digital health solutions in the current and future environments. And not only that, government should have expand government driven incentives to proactively engage private sector in med product development and provide an agile and sophisticated response to the coronaviruses. Not only the, especially I need to highlight, not only the coronavirus, any kinds of pandemic or any kinds of threat, the next in line in future, we have to have expand government driven incentives to proactively engage private sector, especially when it's come to the med product developments and other things. So not only that, I would like to recommend I would like to recommend that we all have experienced work from home during the pandemic period. So the work from home should be continuously strengthened to cater the future pandemic. It reduce especially cost of transportation, unnecessary time wasting, and low cost of dresses and everything. We have experienced that we need to buy some dresses, and we have to dress well and go to the workplaces. But if we can strengthen the work from home concept, these grassroots level public officials also would be easily engaged with the people, and then the people could be able to easily engage with the immediate government. At this point, because we all are having different kinds of issues when it's come to the social and cultural lives. Therefore work from home should be continuously strengthened to cater the future pandemic. Not only that, self-reliance and self-sufficiency is the best opportunity to cater mitigate the threat from the COVID-19. So when it's come to the Sri Lanka, we have experienced that we were coming as a great citizen, which who are having great history from the agricultural side. So we can I don't think it is 100% able to be in a self-sufficient country, but we have to manage even 50% of the self-sufficiency, because we cannot depend on the neighbor countries in 100%. We have experienced that. In as an example, when it's come to the rural area people, they were experienced that the shortage of food supplies, and they were experienced about the shortage of their day-to-day life needs. So at that time, if these three categories of the people, GNs, PHIs and PHI, MOH, and also field officers, including development officers, if they able to motivate the people to to come up with self-sufficiency, even in a half percentage, so they would be able to mitigate. They would be able to facilitate themselves by
Varuni, can we have you?
dialogue.
Can we have you to wind up? Varuni, can you just wind up, dear? Yeah.
Hello,
Yes.
am I audible, ma'am?
Yes. Yes. Please wind up, Varuni. We'll have to continue the other sessions also.
Hello,
Yeah.
Sangeeta ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah, Takbir Kaur, she's going to join now.
She's
You want
going
to
to join because
Ma'am already joined.
She's joined already.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Let me conclude my presentation. So
Yes.
the
Yes.
thing is, I really wanted to highlight in Sri Lankan perspectives, we have experienced that there are three particular categories of the people, as GNs and the PHIMOs and development officers. They are the frontline workers in grassroots level. So each and every in Sri Lankan government, we have the responsibility to improve these people's qualities, and the Sri Lankan government should engage with them indirectly to incorporate with the these three categories to come up with the uh, successful control in pandemic period. So the most important thing is we have to focus on people centric policy. That is the most important thing. So throughout my presentation, I really need to highlight there is an uh, urgent there's an urgency of like focusing on self-reliance and self-sufficiency, as well as people's first policy, and also the decentralization, digitalizations of all government service is essential. I'm really sorry for the taking your time.
Thank you, Varuni. Thank you so much. Varuni has raised many big questions over here and has also spoken a lot about empowering the lowest in the rank of the society, going to the grassroots level. And I believe the Sri Lankan experiment is going to be a very good example set before all of us. So thank you, Varuni. Maybe later we can have some comments if there's time left from the audience here. Okay, now calling upon Takbir Kaur, a research scholar from the Department of Political Science, RGNUL Patiala, Punjab. She'll be speaking on impact of COVID-19 on Sustainable Development Goal 6, special reference to water. So that I believe is something really very important, since we all are talking about hygiene. We are all talking about taking care of ourselves during this particular pandemic. This issue of reference to water and how we are going to look into the COVID situation and the effect on water resources is something very important. Takbir, can we have you? Can you speak? Yeah, can you start, please?
Yes,
Please,
ma'am. Yes,
yeah,
ma'am.
yeah.
Ma'am, is
Please
I
begin.
audible?
Yes, but there's
Okay,
some
thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Ma'am,
background coming. There's a background sound coming. Takbir, can you just go to a place a little more silent place where you'll have less sound coming on the background? Yeah.
ma'am, I'm not able to sharing my screen.
That's okay. Takbir, you can
Okay.
speak even
Ma'am,
without
is
sharing. Yeah,
me
but there's
visible?
a lot of
My screen is visible?
no, we can't see you. You're not we can't see your video. We can see your PPT. Yes, yes, we can see it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. My topic is impact of COVID-19 on sustainable
Takbir,
development.
hello,
Yes,
Takbir,
ma'am.
dear. You have
Yes.
sounds coming on the background, so we'll not be able to hear you, dear. There'll be disturbance. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, wait,
Yeah.
wait, wait, wait.
Yes.
एक और इनकी साउंड आ रही है आसपास तो ऐसे डिस्टर्ब हो रहे हैं बाहर दिखना बाहर रोड भी हुई है ना एक्सक्यूज मी मैम मैम प्लीज गिव मी सम
Okay.
टाइम
Okay. Hello, Aruna. Hello, Aruna. 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 Surbhi, how much time is left for this session to end?
Ma'am, we have to wrap this session before 4.
Yeah. Oh, before 4 o'clock. Okay, okay. So we have some time left.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how long Takbir might take 15 minutes. And then we'll have if time permits, then we can have the question answer session.
Yes, ma'am, is I'm audible?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, my topic is impact of COVID-19 on Sustainable Development Goal 6, special reference to water. Ma'am, introduction. I'm start from introduction. The basic. I would like to present a PPT. During the COVID-19 outcome, the entire world is dealing with the numerous of the new challenges. The impact of COVID-19 is visible on the every sector, and the effect of COVID-19 can be seen on the Sustainable Development Goal also. There is an indirect link between the COVID-19 and Sustainable Development Goal. The agenda of the adoption by the United Nations member states in 2015 are 17 sustainable development goals, most of which are interconnected, and 6th sustainable development goal is to ensure access to water and sanitation for all. But with the occurrence of this pandemic, those results are very serious, and sustainable development goals are also getting affected in some way and other. Sustainable development goal 6 is to ensure access to water and sanitation for all is affected badly. And the objectives of my study is to identify the impact of pandemic on sustainable development goal 6, special refers to water, and to identify some suggestions and measures to overcome the risk of the water scarcity. The goal is divided into the 6 targets. Sustainable Development Goal 6.1, achieve the universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all. The only defense against the pandemic is that we wash our hands frequently, 20 seconds each time. The effect is clean water remain the most important preventive health measures in the world, and a proper hand wash involves lathering soap and scrubbing hands on the both sides at least 20 seconds according to WHO guidelines, and a 30 to 40 seconds hand wash would use up around the 4 liters of the water if the tap is on, and the 2 liter with the tap closed, while scrubbing with the soap. And around 20 to 40 liters of the water is used up to every day, with the assumption that every person clean her hand at least 10 times a day instead of using an average of the 5 times a day. A family of the 5 members would thus need 100 to 200 liter of the water per day only to wash a hand. This would result in the generation of about 200 liter of uh, wash water per liter, and 20 to 25% increase in the water demand that generate a wastewater from the human settlement. And this table shows the estimate the water used in the 5 person households, the period of the time per day and per month. Like the water used every 20 seconds in a liter, 100 per day, and 3100 uh, per month. And then wastage water, like uh, wastage water while scrubbing the soap every 15 seconds in a liter, and 150 liter per day, and 4650 per month. And same the wastewater generation in liter, like 225 liter water is based, and 6975 wastage per month. And lack of the access to clean water affect the vulnerable of to disease and ill health, and hand washing and good hygienic practice unlock the benefit of the water and sanitation services. The need of the hour is also to establish a commonly agreed method to assess the affordability, as payment for the service should not be barrier to assess the service. In the country where the waste resources are limited, water in the country where water resources are limited, the government should work on the existing water paradise. And Sustainable Development Goal 6.2 achieve access to adequate and equitable sanitation and hygienics for all, and end up open defecations, pay special attention to the need for women's and girls and those of the vulnerable section. It calls for the country to end the open defecation to ensure that everyone has to access a basic toilets, and to put in place a system of the safe management of excreta, and better sanitation is considered to be one of the key elements in the management of COVID-19 spread. And Sustainable Development Goal 6.3 by 2030 improve the water quality by reducing the pollution, eliminating dumping, and minimizing release of the hazard chemicals and materials. Having the proportion of the untreated sewage water and sustainability increase the recycling and safe reuse globally. With the global lockdown, the water bodies are received minimal industrial hazards and solid waste. As a result of this, the quality of the water in the river and the lake has partially improved. However, this is a temporary solution, not a permanent solution, and call the decision makers to revisit our planning approach for cleaning the water bodies. There is a need to have a combination of the approach like the sewage treatment plants, infant treatment plants, and decentralized wastewater, solid waste management systems, which will treat the domestic and industrial waste before entering the water body that endure the less pollution. And next one, Sustainable Development Goal 6.4, sustainably increase the water use efficiency across all sectors and ensure the sustainable withdrawals and supply of the wastewater to address the water scarcity and sustainability, reduce the number of the people suffering from the water scarcity. And COVID-19 has brought to a limited light the need to the water pursuit and water-wise to tackle the water scarcity. Awareness and mindset changes are required to use the water efficiently. And Sustainable Development Goal 6.5 implement the integrated water resource management at all levels, including through the transboundary cooperation as appropriate. The adequate integrated water resource management is one of the most powerful tools to ensure the supply of the drinking water and wastewater treatment. The role of the integrated urban water management, integrated water supply and demand, and wastewater management, stormwater, etc., has been suggested as a way out to sustainable water management by the several researchers. And Sustainable Development Goal 6.6 by 2020 protect and restore the water related ecosystem, including the mountains, forest, wetland, rivers, aquariums, and lakes. The effect of the climate change on the ecosystem cannot be ignored. The instance of the frequent flood and drought is a new normal, and to top it all, and recent the forest fire in USA and Australia are the witness to the effect of the climate change. And there are some suggestions. Therefore, the need of the hour is to chat extraneous plans to overcome the risk of the water scarcity. Integrating water resource management measures are the required in order to minimize the water scarcity risk, need more financial and technical supports, and increase the knowledge to fulfill their sustainable development goals on water and sanitation for all. Enhance the policy making to take account of the social cost benefit approach when the pricing water, strengthening environmental law, and creating ecosystem centric regimes and making the technology sustainable. Every citizen need to careful in the use of the water. As a society we need to be water wise. Every drop of the water counts. The current condition provide an opportunity to promote the idea of maintaining hygienics, as it is imperative now and should be encouraged in the future too. We have probably heard about 4 Rs, that is reduce, reuse, recycle, and recover. We are guiding and help us to manage and conserve our resources to lead a lifestyle that is more focused on the social resource management and more sustainable. New words are added, and 4 Rs is converted into 7 Rs. The approaches are of 7 Rs like reduce, reuse, recycle, recover, recharge, rethink, and regenerate, which gives a holistic view to serve the water should be incorporated in our water management plans. Such as approach give us the wider lens to think and help us to conserve water in a every possible way. And the mindset of the society need to be changed, and as a responsible citizen of this planet, we should try to take every possible step to conserve water. Wastage should be reduced and minimized, and awareness should be spread by the NGOs, government institutes, etc. Many webinars and video conference platforms should be used to spread the word of the mouth and sanitize the citizens about water resource, especially focus on the sustainability point of the view. At last, the impact, I would like to say that the impact of the COVID-19 is visible on every sector, and the effect of the COVID-19 can be seen on sustainable development goal. That is special reference to water. The today world is asking to washing hand multiple times. Moreover, the millions of the people lack the safe drinking water, sanitation and funding is inadequate. Therefore, the need of the time is to plan to overcome this risk water scarcity. Integrated water resource management measurements are necessary in order to minimize the water scarcity risk. Thank you. Thank you. This is all about impact of COVID-19 on water. Thank you, ma'am.
Hello. Thank you, dear. Thank you, Tadbir.
Yes.
To sum up, I'm sure that the session today has brought in several issues, and the speakers have addressed the most untouched spheres that affect on account of COVID that has affected us. From Dr. Neela, who gave a vivid expression to the history of Indian language and the changes in the phonetics, the semantics of the language issue has also been touched upon in the best manner possible. And the global favorite, English, today is making the most out of the pandemic. Sampurna's approach to security as its further degeneration in all existing forms of global appearances within a theoretical grounding explored the need to look at security in new light. As far as Madhubhashini goes, she spoke about Sri Lanka and the experiment of Sri Lanka in handling the COVID situation, where she brought in the grassroots workers with the strengthening of grassroots level bureaucracy, grassroots workers to shield and protect the least empowered. So I really liked her talking about redefining empowerment with digitalization, and how with a more digitalized atmosphere, we can probably have people coming into the mainstream, the least coming into the mainstream, and the government trying to do the best they can for them. In India also, I think we need to follow this kind of strategies to help the lower in the rung to come up. As far as Takbir goes, she brought in the most vital element of this entire discourse on COVID, that's water, the water resources, bringing in important statistics. She related to water and brought in a very well-researched presentation on water, and announced that water is the most important thing in this world. And if the COVID situation keeps on, if it goes on for a few months now, it certainly will create a new water crisis in the world. However, one has to wait and watch whether these things and these subjects are really going to make a difference, and whether discourses of this kind would actually make the difference. The only thing I can see, the ray of hope, is that certain humanitarian responses and the power of the civil society is being seen very much. They have become the most demanding in this entire COVID situation, and they are the ones who will be providing resolutions for future pandemics, and they are the ones who are going to give the resilience for future pandemics. With these few words, I would like to open the session for questions. If you have time, yeah, we have some time left. So participants over here can address the question to, a particular speaker, and then probably after all the questions are addressed, the speakers can reply. Yeah. Going on to the discussion. Dr. Paul Rosario.
I have a question here from someone.
Yeah, Dr. Neela. Yeah,
Yes,
Dr. Neela.
Professor. Somebody has asked me a question. asking me to talk about physical distancing and social distancing.
Okay.
And she's asked me whether we can use physical distancing rather than social distancing.
Okay.
There is a difference between physical distancing and social distancing. Social distancing means you keep yourself away from social gathering. But physical distancing means only that you distance yourself from some other person. You do not go to crowded places, you do not go to malls, you keep yourself socially away. So, in this scenario, I feel social distancing would be a better word because you do not mix with society and spread the disease. That is why I said reality has physical dimensions. When there's a disease and it is a pandemic and it is spreading, we use the term social distancing. I feel that is a better word. Physical distancing is not wrong, but they mean two different things. There's a slight nuance to both the words. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you, Professor Manasi.
Okay, we have many participants who are youngsters over here. You could come up with your ideas. Yes, please. You could ask questions. Okay, there's just one question for Sampurna. Could I ask? I'm Sangeeta Roy here.
Yes,
Sampurna?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, ma'am, sure.
Sampurna, yeah, I've spent a lot of time working on refugees. Actually, my PhD was on refugees. I just wanted to look at how you see the refugee issue in future and how they become a major question with security as the new normal that's going to come in. And as I told you, the jingoistic platforms and the xenophobic attributes are going to take a new stand now, saying that outsiders would not be allowed. And with Donald Trump in the helm of affairs, you can understand what's going to happen in future with your narration, with your narratives, and with the kind of theoretical grounding that you did on the third world and the global south facing a lot of issues. I think this issue is further going to deteriorate. I wanted your comments on it.
Sure, ma'am. Actually, you have pointed out a very important issue, that is the issue of refugees. And I have already mentioned in my presentation. Maybe I wasn't a bit clear in that way. Uh, well, refugee has always been seen as a major threat. Now, this has been a convention when we look at refugees, because refugee to some extent is a pressure on a country's economy, on the country's social fabric. Um Now, in the new normal, where if we look at the post-COVID era, then, well, one thing can be added is that refugees can be a carrier of the virus. Now, here again, as I've already mentioned, the identity, the question of identity, and how identity will be combined with the ideas of the disease, the idea of the virus. And we have already seen that with the onset of the pandemic, many of the nations have decided to close their borders. If we look at India, in fact, I'm being a scholar from India, I've noticed that India have allowed international flights, but then India had seized, and rather I would say India not really seized, but rather had closed the borders much earlier in order to uh, constrict the cross-border flow of population. So here again, the idea that the neighboring countries, the marginal populations who will cross the border and come and settle down in the country can become a threat. Not really threat in terms of the economic pressure, not really threat in terms of pressure onto the social security schemes, but here the threat is that they will bring in the disease with them. So I think refugee will again be constructed as a major threat, as a immensely potential threat in the post-COVID era. And that will be relevant both for the global south and global north to some extent, I would say.
Right. Yeah. I think I got the answer. But there's this one thing, as you've been talking about, when we talk about the Convention on Refugees, the refusal of South Asian countries and the third world nations not accepting it. Now that will further aggravate. And as far as the West goes, the attribute of compassion fatigue, which they talk about, they believe that they have done enough for the refugees and now they do not want to do anything more. That thing will further aggravate, and I think situations will go off hand. Uh, we'll just, it could be the other way around also. Let's see how things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. So if there's any question, I think the presenters were excellent and they did a very good job and they touched upon very important features of the topics that they had selected for themselves. First of all, I congratulate all of them for selecting such fabulous topics, and the way in which they handled it was also really good. So if there are no questions further, then I would like Shailaja to take over and conclude the session.
Distinguished chairs, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end of this session, it is my great honor to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of WPC. I would like to express our gratitude and sincere thanks to Dr. Sangeeta Roy for accepting our request to chair the session. We would like to extend our sincere thanks to all the speakers for delivering such a comprehensive, insightful presentation. We are honored to have you all, the speakers, with us here today. We would like to acknowledge our gratitude to our friends from the diplomatic community, exports, academia, media, and different organizations. Last but not least, I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for our audience who participated in the webinar and those who are watching us live. We are truly honored to have you all with us since morning, and I hope to stay connected with you in future as well. I request all of you to kindly join us for the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Shailaja. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Neeta ma'am.
Thank you, Professor Sangeeta.
I think we would have actually met, then I would have had so many things to speak to you. That is really nice of you. Yeah, you spoke very
Thank
well.
you, Professor. I've
Thank
been
you
to
so
your
much.
department. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Sangeeta ma'am. Royston? Surbi, Royston has joined.
No, I guess not yet. Yeah, he's there.
Okay.
But I guess there is time for next session.
Yeah, 15 minutes are there.
Yeah.
So let's because this is last session, more people will join, and your class will going to join here. Please look into that. Surbi.
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay.
Many students are joined already.
SY and TY students.
Yeah.
Right now, your TY, BSc, IT, and CS are here.
Okay, just check your class.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
Royston, are you there?
Yeah, I made him co-host.
Okay. So one by one, all participants will join.
Yeah, once all the speakers join, I'll start making them co-host, and after that, we can start.
Yeah. By 5 only we will start. आप लोग YouTube से क्वेश्चंस ले रहे हो ना? Media coordinator?
Yes, वहाँ पे नहीं, I'm checking.
Okay.
Now tell me, who's helping me coordinate this session? Session 6.
Sir, Royston. Royston will help you for coordinating. Hello, sir.
Okay.
How are you, sir?
Hi. Good, good. I can see Mohan Kumar is here. I can see Dr. Daniela Perota here.
Yes.
Good. Now, what is the process you follow? Does Royston, who will introduce the speakers? I introduce. I can do that also. I have no problem.
You will introduce, sir. You will introduce
Okay.
speakers. Royston will introduce you, sir.
Okay.
So we have some more time.
We have lots of time. We have lots of time.
Lots of time.
Mohan Kumar wants to be unmuted. Please unmute him. Though we have 15 minutes to go, but please unmute.
Yes, yes, I have been unmuted, Shakti. Thank you.
How are you?
Very well. Thank you.
An early bird. It's 5 o'clock.
I think, you know, the organizers said, if you don't come in at 3:45, we'll shoot you. So I said, okay. I'll show up at 3:45.
That's a good one.
We are concerned about speakers, sir.
Obviously.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Only thing is, I would have seen Aurangabad, which I've never seen in my life, if it wasn't for the COVID. You would have called us all to. You're in Aurangabad, isn't it? Water Policy Center.
Yes, yes. We, our waterfall center in Aurangabad, in Maharashtra.
I know.
Yeah, yes. Because in
Aruna,
India,
where are you?
I'm from Mumbai. Mumbai.
Right, you're Mumbai or Aurangabad?
Mumbai. Because of lockdown, sir. I have to be here. Can't travel.
I was in Baroda yesterday. I'm in Delhi today.
Wow, great. Still
you're able to travel, Shakti, without quarantine?
Yeah. Country is open.
Everything is open
I run
now.
an institute in Baroda, so I had to go there. Everything. There's Aurangabad in Bihar also, but that's a small town. The one in Maharashtra is big.
I think we should.
That's why I mentioned it is in Maharashtra.
I think we should wish, Shakti, you might want to wish. You might want to wish our friend from Argentina. She's here as well.
Yes, Dr. Daniela Perota is here.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
How are you?
Bon dia. How do you say?
Hello.
I think you say buenos dias.
Anyway. Buenos dias. Yes. That's
Buenos
it.
dias.
Yes. Buenos dias.
Oh, bon dia is Portuguese. Sorry, my fault.
Is Argentina doing okay?
We are still under isolation and social distancing. The cases this couple of days have decreased a little, but it's still a high circulation of the virus. So borders are still closed and schools are closed, universities are closed, but some shops and the economic and enterprises are going on. So they are still working. We are trying to deal with it.
I can imagine.
It's been long because we've been under isolation since the 20th of March.
Pretty much.
So people is tired of being inside their houses And the situation first was, the more critical situation was in the capital city, Buenos Aires, and the surrounding area, in the Buenos Aires province or state. That's a huge area. But now we have more circulation in the other provinces. So that's that's critical, because not all the provinces have increased their hospitals capabilities
Capacity.
and the I don't know how to say it in English, the intensive therapies units and all those things.
Intensive care units. Yeah, absolutely. Now, can I ask you a question, Daniela? It says you are National Director of International Cooperation, Secretariat of Educational Cooperation and Priority Action, City of Buenos Aires. So this is the province of Buenos Aires or the municipal city of Buenos Aires, or is it, what is it?
No, I work for the National Ministry of Education.
The National Ministry, because it's in City of Buenos Aires. It is just Buenos Aires. I would have said that. Because it says City of Buenos Aires, I thought maybe Ciudad de Buenos Aires. No, the country. Okay.
Yes,
and
yes.
You'll be. She's speaking on higher education governance after COVID-19. Mohan, you're speaking on post-COVID world order, challenges and opportunities.
Right.
Who else is there?
I will include a bit of geopolitics in it, if you don't mind.
As long as we do it within 15 minutes.
No, 10 minutes, 10 minutes.
सर को अनम्यूट करो.
और कौन-कौन आ गया स्पीकर और कोई आया अभी?
बाकी 3 स्पीकर्स ने ज्वाइन नहीं किया है.
हाँ, I know.
I made sir co-host. I made Bavaskar sir co-host.
Our sir is here.
Hello, sir. This is Rao sir. Bavaskar. How are you?
How are you? How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
नहीं.
Speaker. Ambassador Mohan Kumar joined?
Yes. Yeah, he's joined. Mohan has joined. Yeah. We still have time now, right? Quite a bit of time left. So Dr. Pandit has to join, Dr. Pacheco has to join, and Raj Krishna. Yeah, tell me.
Yeah. They will join, I think, within a few minutes. Yeah. Professor Daniel is also joined. So.
Yeah, Daniela has joined, and we are chatting with her. Dr. Pacheco has also joined. Good morning, Dr. Pacheco. Please unmute him. Is he unmuted? Yeah, no, he's not unmuted yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Surabhi.
Yes, sir.
Just unmute.
Please unmute Dr. Pacheco. Dr. Pacheco. Hi, good morning.
I made him co-host. He can unmute himself now.
Okay, he'll have to unmute himself. Okay.
Yeah.
No, she can't. He has to do it. Okay.
Yeah, I can. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
Yeah. Professor Santisri is also there.
Dr. Santisri Pandit is also here. Very good.
Now only I think Raj Krishnan is
Raj Krishnan is.
Yeah, but I think we should start. I mean,
hey, it is still 7 minutes to go. 3:53. I'm a very time-bound person. 3:53 does not mean 3:59. It does not mean 4:01 also.
Oh, correct.
Yeah. And Royston will help me, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Aurangabad is relatively okay in terms of COVID?
Yes, sir. It's controlled, but and still the cases are growing, but under control. And cities will managed by the authority as well in terms of controlling COVID.
Just worried about Mumbai now.
Mumbai.
Yeah.
How was the morning session, Oscar?
So it was good. It was
Session was
good.
good. Huh? Okay.
And yeah, and only like Professor Mohammad Yunus is inaugurated this
Right.
the first session, and then we had yeah, then we had other session like session 2, 3 scholars from different countries. It's going on well since morning.
I was there in session 5 listening. Session 5, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
Not whatever. 3. Satar Naga was
Yeah,
speaking.
5.
5. Yeah.
Yeah, you told me that Satar Naga.
Yeah. When you called me, I was listening there. Yes.
Yes. So actually, I'm calling every chair to just a reminding call happen hour before. So just a chair is important because when chair is there, then we can speak it at the time. If chair is not there, then again,
Problem.
Okay, so Professor Santisri, I think you stuck in US, right?
She's still on mute. She has to unmute herself.
Surabhi, yeah.
I made ma'am co-host. She has to unmute herself.
Yeah, I saw she's co-host. She can unmute herself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Surabhi has done her job, not to worry.
Yeah.
So, Rao Sahab, what is your audience like? Are they students? Are they young professionals? What is it?
So, will you mail me so then I can try from my side? Hello?
No.
It's a mixed audience. It's a mixed audience.
Yeah, it's a mixed audience actually. Students from colleges as well as some youngsters who want to learn more about this.
Okay.
And some Buddhas like us.
You look very young, sir.
No. Same vintage.
Royston or Surabhi, you just take care of this thing because I'm not able to practice.
Yeah. Rostam will do. Don't worry. And I'm there. Don't worry.
Yeah,
I'm a very strict chairman.
Yes, I know that.
I'm a strict chairman. Royston, a minute to go.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Once we can check everyone's audio, or speaker's audio.
Most have spoken, I think.
Okay. So
Yeah, Dr. Pandit I've not heard, but otherwise all the other speakers have spoken. And Dr. Ralkrishna has not joined. Has he joined yet?
Good morning, sir. Namaskar, sir. I'm Dr. Pandit.
Morning, Dr. Pandit. Nice to hear you, Dr. Pandit.
Yeah. Morning, sir.
How are you?
Fine, sir. Thank you, sir.
And you're in Pune or in USA?
Now in US, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. Because Pune is very bad. We are very badly hit.
You mean
Coronavirus, we are
you,
in the red zone.
No,
Yes,
Madam
Pune is badly hit.
Dr. Pandey, you are seriously expecting me to believe that United States is better than Pune?
At least Virginia is better, sir.
Yeah, really? I'm glad to hear that because the photos that are coming out of US are very worrying.
So that is the Democratic campaign. This is an election year.
Yeah, no, but my sister lives in US, you know. She's a US
Yeah,
citizen.
New York is bad, sir. New York, Seattle,
Okay. That must be the case.
California. But Virginia, we have no restrictions, sir.
I see.
Where in Virginia are you?
Sir, in Northern Virginia, Ashburn,
Where?
near Washington, D.C.
Ashburn. I know Ashburn. I've lived in McLean for 5 years. So I know Burke, I know Ashburn, I know those areas, Fairfax.
My husband and daughter are here, sir. That's why.
Okay.
Shakti sir, let's begin. It's
ready. Launch.
Okay. Yeah. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening wherever you are. On behalf of the Water Policy Center, COVID-19 Dialogue, Sectoral Impacts, Global Responses and Enhancing Resilience to Future Pandemics. It gives me a great pleasure to extend a warm welcome for our distinguished speakers, chair and participants who have joined this session. To chair this session, we have Mr. Shakti Sinha with us. It is my great pleasure to introduce the chair. Mr. Shakti Sinha is the director of Atal Bihari Vajpayee Institute of Policy Research and International Studies, MS University, Vadodara. He is a distinguished fellow and at India Foundation. Mr. Sinha was the former director of the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library and was part of the Indian Administrative Service from the 1979 batch. He has also served as a joint secretary at Prime Minister's office in the past. Without extending further, let me request Mr. Shakti Sinha to take the charge of the session.
Thank you, Royston. Thank you very much. Thanks to WPC and its for organizing this two-day event. It's wonderful that, all these years we thought of technology and how to use technology for communications better and education, etc. And suddenly we realized that we're organizing more conferences and more seminars these days than we did before COVID had hit us. So I think it's a very unusual, interesting, sad, tragic, but yet opportunity times. We have 5 good speakers. So instructions are very clear from the host that the chairman shall speak at the end if there is time. I like the word if there is time. So it depends on my speakers. Ladies, gentlemen, you have 15 minutes each. Our first speaker is Ambassador Mohan Kumar, who's the chairman of a Government of India funded think tank called the RIS. He's also professor and dean, the Office of International Affairs and Global Initiative, Tyndall Global University. And Mohan would be speaking on post-COVID world order, challenges and opportunity. Dr. Mohan Kumar, your 15 minutes starts now.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
May I also request the other speakers and others to keep themselves on mute? Yeah, sorry, Mohan. I just wanted others to be on mute because sometimes we get feedback and that disturbs us, I'll do the same with me. Over to you. Sorry, interrupting you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you very much, Shakti. And it's a pleasure to participate in this webinar organized by the Water Policy Center. I'll try to stick to 12 or 14 minutes so that we have more time for questions. Let me begin by outlining each particular outcome as I see it in the post-COVID world order, and then see for India, what are the implications of that outcome. The first outcome that I would like to speculate about, but I think it's a near certainty, that I think the state is back in a big way. If before the COVID, we thought the market could do certain things and the state could do certain things, I am absolutely convinced that in the post-COVID world order, the state will play a much more important role than before. Now, this essentially means that if you look at the countries which have been successful in trying to tackle COVID, you need a strong state, which is correct, but you also need a state in which the citizens have a huge degree of trust. And these two are going to be extremely important in a post-COVID world. You look at countries like New Zealand, you could look at countries like Germany, you look at countries like Taiwan, you look at countries which have done well. My sense is not only do these countries have a strong state, they also have a state which evokes total trust from the citizens. And of course, good leadership goes without saying. So for India, what this means in the future is that the state not only has to be strong in India, but the state must also deliver better than it has done in the past. We saw some issues when the migrant labor started moving and so on and so forth. But essentially, whether it is direct cash transfer to the farmers, whether it is a question of making available 5 kilos of cereals and 1 kilo of pulses for the people who are vulnerable, the state delivery is going to be extremely important. And I thought this is something we should focus on. The second outcome, as I see it for countries like India, is that we have now been shown evidence, if evidence was needed, that health infrastructure is absolutely critical. Public health infrastructure in developing countries, but also countries like India in particular. So I'm hoping that this COVID will result in some difference in allocation and more money being made available for public health in our budgets. Scientist after scientist has said that this is not the last pandemic. You're going to have more pandemics in the future. If that is the case, then we should be taking public health much more seriously than we have so far. So that's the second outcome that I think is extremely important. I also think that value chains, as we have known so far, will completely change. So this famous example of an iPhone and 16 countries involved in the iPhone, the last bit of assembly happens in China, and therefore you get the iPhone created in San Francisco, assembled in China. I think that model is likely to change. I don't know how rapidly it will change. I don't know in what ways it will change, but change it will, because you are not going to have just-in-time manufacturing as we understood it so far. You're going to have a different kind of value chain. Call it resilient supply chains, call it value chains with trust, whatever you want to call it. There is going to be some change, and those changes need to be monitored carefully. I do believe India has an excellent opportunity in positioning itself in this value chain, because we can try to be a net public health security provider, not just for the region, but also for the world, given the background of vaccine production in India, given the background of pharmaceutical production in India, given the fact that we are able to send field hospitals to Africa. I sincerely believe India can become a regional, if not a global, net public health security provider in the post-COVID phase. Since I was a diplomat in my past life and I'm currently a professor, I also believe diplomacy itself will change in very dramatic ways. I continue to believe now that diplomacy now will be based much more again on trust. Geopolitics, geostrategy will make a huge difference to the way relations are conducted. Previously, you could have a set of countries with which you had political, strategic relations, and then you had another set of countries with which you had economic and commercial relations. The idea of ASEAN comes to mind, where ASEAN has a nuclear security umbrella with the United States and then does enormous trading with China. I am not sure this can carry on for all of us, because what you see happening is you're going to see a merging of economic, commercial, geostrategic, and cultural factors. These will all merge. You will tend to do trade, you will tend to do strategic partnerships with countries with which you are more comfortable. I don't know what criterion it will be. And talking of the international landscape, I also believe we are in the middle of a full-fledged transition from the liberal order, which is on the verge of finishing, and a new kind of order, which is yet to establish itself. What you see is two important poles, US and China, and no pun intended, they are poles apart. They're two poles, but they are poles apart. So what you really see is the EU, you've got Australia, you've got China, India, Japan, you've got other countries, a whole lot of other countries, which are trying to jostle and position themselves. And this could be very, very interesting in terms of how the new international order comes into being. That is another challenge that we need to face. The other outcome I think is extremely important is the Sustainable Development Goals, which have been announced by the United Nations, to which all our countries are completely attached and committed. My question is, and I would like some of the panelists and others to comment on it, especially our chairman, who's very knowledgeable as well. Can we achieve these Sustainable Development Goals on time? That is my question to you, frankly. We have got 2030 as the deadline for abolition of extreme poverty. China is saying we will try and abolish extreme poverty soon. But leaving aside China, I talk of India, I talk of Africa, I talk of Latin America, I talk of other countries. Can we sincerely, legitimately stick to this goal of abolition of extreme poverty by the year 2030? So this is something I ask you. Along with that, I also ask you the question about climate change. Are we now sincerely committed to a carbon neutral economy at some stage? China has very dramatically announced in the UN that they will peak in 2030 and that they will have a carbon neutral economy in 2060. This needs to be evaluated, and this needs to be considered against the background of coal-fired plants being opened in China in the last 1 year, which have exceeded the previous 3 years and so on. But I ask in general whether the goal of at least 2 degrees, forget the 1.5 degrees, can we at least work together to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal, which was reflected in the Paris Climate Change Accords of no more than 2 degrees increase compared to pre-industrial levels? Are we on track to achieve those goals? Finally, Mr. Chairman, I also believe that we are going to see a trading environment, and if I can just spend a couple of minutes on trade, it's also an area I have specialized in. Are we seeing the end of MFN anchored WTO-based international trade? Are we seeing an end to it? Is trade in the future going to be only preferential, only reciprocal, and only geostrategic? Are we looking at that? MFN trade is out. So if I have to trade with somebody, I need to have a good relationship with that country. I need to enter into an FTA with that country. So are we looking at a situation where trade becomes completely geostrategic and reciprocal, not MFN, WTO based as it was until now? Along with trade, I would urge that we also look at technology. What about 5G? How is 5G being decided in the world? And post-COVID, that'll be one of the earliest decisions that we have to decide. Is it being decided on political grounds, strategic grounds, or economic grounds? That's one. Second, if we are going towards renewable energy, what about supplies of semiconductor chips? What about supply of cobalt? What about supply of lithium? Because without these 3 things, you can't have the 4th industrial revolution. Where are these supplies located? How are these supplies going to be accessed? And how is this going to be distributed? And finally, my question or my point is on the production of a vaccine. in the context of COVID, that we negotiated painstakingly a WTO declaration on TRIPS and public health, TRIPS being trade-related intellectual property rights. That very clearly says if there is a pandemic, you can say goodbye to patents. Nobody denies this is a pandemic. What we have is worse than a pandemic, if it's possible. So how is vaccine going to be produced? How is this going to be patented? How is this going to be distributed? India might be in a somewhat advantageous position because 9 out of 10 vaccines which are going to be produced are bound to have some link with India. But we have large parts of the world where health infrastructure is a problem and vaccine needs to be made available equitably to the population of the world. So Shakti, I will stop here. I realize I've raised more questions than answers, but I'm really happy to address some of them. And since I was fortunate to speak first, I've raised these questions, but I'm happy to address some of these in the question and answer session. Once again, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mohan. Thank you a lot. You've been very concise, and I like your ending. In fact, when you were addressing me, for a moment, I thought I'm appearing for a job interview. You know, you wanted me to answer, but I'm sure that our other panelists and our audience would be able to contribute to that. Having said that, let me now request our next speaker, Dr. Daniela Perota. She is the National Director of International Cooperation, the Secretariat of Educational Cooperation and Priority Actions in Argentina, and she'll be speaking on higher education governance after the COVID-19 crisis. Dr. Perota, over to you.
Let me unmute it. Thank you so much. I am currently working, as you say, at the Ministry of Education, but I'm a researcher of higher education governance and internationalization, so I'm happy to be here as well in this twofold role. Well, I'll try to be as quick as I can. I did a presentation so you can keep up with the ideas. And I must say I'm picking up Ambassador Professor Kumar's opinion about the role of the states. I think that it is crucial. So my presentation will be about the challenges and opportunities for higher education governance. And I think I can use the Argentinian case to wrap up some conclusions regarding higher education governance as well, especially for countries like us, like Argentinian countries, Latin American countries, and also India, even though we have some differences. First of all, I would like to speak about the role of the state in Argentina. As you may or may not know, regarding this dilemma between health or the economy, our president says health first and life is first. So all the key policies regarding the tackling with the COVID pandemic has been to put health and the life of our citizens in the first place. Then I will say some quick things, some ideas about our higher education system, because there are some specificities that has to do with our response to COVID. Then I will deal with the COVID response that has put the right to higher education in the first place, as well as the right to health. And I will like to speak about some of the challenges and opportunities for higher education governance, including some ideas for the geopolitical arena. And I must say, I am totally agree with what the first presenter has said before. And I have wrapped up the idea of care diplomacy. So first, when we came to government in December 2019, our president said that we should start by the last one so as to reach everyone. That is to say, to leave no one behind. So our initial conditions before the pandemic had to do with unsustainable endowment, with high poverty levels, and hunger. With the first big and ambitious plan of the government or program of the government is Argentina Against Hunger. So hunger was the key issue of the first month of the government. But then we have the pandemic, and the pandemic The first case in Argentina entered around the 10th of March, while the situation in Europe was at its peak, and it had to do with the circulation of the virus from Europe to Argentina, especially an Italian, a person who had been in Italy entered the region with the virus, and then we started to deal with the situation, to, as we say in Spanish, to earn time so as to create capabilities and try to keep safe as much citizens as we can, so that not so many deaths will be, or lives will be lost. So the key policies, and this is important because it has to do with my idea of care diplomacy, has to put the state first. As Kumar said, the role of the state has been key to understand the situation and to set up all these policies regarding COVID and beyond. So we have what we call ASPO in Spanish, preventive and compulsory social isolation since the 20th of March. We are still under isolation. That means a lot of time that our citizens have been in their houses, even though some areas have now are more flexible regarding isolation. We have social distancing, which we call DISPO in Spanish, and a lot of policy measures have been taken regarding to sustain and to leave no one behind. That means, as I mentioned, if unemployment, poverty, hunger was a key issue, what the government did was to put money on these people's life so that they can cope with the situation. So we have an emergency family income, an emergency assistance program for the work and the production. So as the factories and many of the enterprises were closed, what we did as a government was to put money on these employees so that we can leverage the situation with the companies. We have border closure. We're still under border closure, even though some commercial flights are ongoing since the last 20 days, but the borders are closed, and so on measures. So this is very important because the response of the state is not isolated, and the response of the higher education system is not isolated. It has to do with this general and overview key measures of the government. So in order to put your minds, and I have 5 more minutes or 7 more minutes, we have to mention that the higher education in Argentina has some specificities, some main characteristics. First of all, it is ruled by the idea of the right to higher education. So everyone can access and graduate of higher educations. And the system is mainly publicly funded. We have national universities, which is the green map on your left-hand side. And then we have other private institutions. So it is free of charge. There are no entry exams. There are no quotas. So you can, as many people as they want, they can enter to the system. It is ruled by its autonomy. So the state does not control universities. We have financial autarky. 80% of the enrollment is in public universities. And the science, and there's a mistake there. Science and technology and innovation activities are publicly financed and conducted in the national university system, and it is a federal system, though it is concentrated on some big areas and capital cities of the country. This is important also because in Argentina we have this separation between the national university system and the scientific system. So the red arrows show you the most important things of this slide, which means we have the public universities and the governance of higher education has to do with the actors and the ministry. And as well, we have the science and technology system, where we have the Ministry of Science and Technology, a National Council of Scientific Research, and the National Agency for Promotion of Research, which is the one that finances the projects. So, saying that, there has been a quick response to the COVID pandemic. If you may know or may not know, when the virus entered the country, we were still during the summer course and starting also the first semester of our classes. So many of our higher education students, and almost all the students, did not have presential classes since this year because the semester was starting. So when we have the isolation, the compulsory and preventive isolation and the closure of the institutions, the system has to quickly respond and go to online teaching. There has been a quick adaptability. The higher education institutions have shown some resilience. And what we try to do as a government, and this is why it is important, the role of the state, is to assure the right to higher education, which is twofold, which means the individual right of every citizen to enter the university and get training, teaching, so on and so forth. And it is a collective or social right. That means to say that our people, the whole community, benefits from what is going on in the university. So the things that we had to do were to mitigate inequalities, especially technology and connectivity. We had to provide aid and assistance to students, to institutions, because they were suffering from several problems. The universities proved that they have a high community engagement, and Argentina has been champion or has a strong position regarding the global research collaborations to find the vaccine. So currently we are working with some research networks, and we are one of the countries that will have the vaccine in Latin America and provide the vaccine for when it is founded or proved to be efficient in the region. So our system not only has a very strong publicly found tradition, but also a tradition of research collaborations at the global level, but especially at the regional level. And this is very important. And regarding the internationalization of higher education, which is what I mostly do at the ministry, we have repatriated our citizens that were abroad during this pandemic. We have a lot of students and researchers and professors that were having their research periods or their research or their training abroad, and we have to repatriate them while the cases were quite critical in other countries. And this opened the floor to tackle taboo issues. I will not go through this in depth because I have spent almost my 10 minutes, but here you have in three main axes what higher education institutions and with the coordination of the state have done during this pandemic. And
you have 3 minutes more, don't worry. You have 3 minutes more, take your time. Take it.
Okay,
very interesting, very interesting.
Thank you. So first we have to rapidly go on to virtual education. This may seem very easy for many higher education institutions, but in Argentina, we have kind of strong regulations regarding the provision of distance educations. Argentina has not signed any free trade agreement that includes the service of higher education because it is a right assured by our constitution and some laws. So not so many of our institutions were prepared to go online. This has to be said. It has been a huge effort that required a lot of energy from other actors in order to put it into practice. This is very important because some universities, the private sector had experience in providing virtual education, but not the public sector, the national universities. Regarding national universities, only a few that related to democratization activities. So this was, all the efforts were put here. And then other issues arose because, as you may know, we are not a developed country. So the access to connectivity, the access to technological equipment, the access to digital technologies was not equal and was not fully for the population and our students. So efforts were made as well in order to mitigate some of these technological and digital gaps. Regarding community engagement and research, our universities, I will start by community engagement. Our universities provided the infrastructure for field hospitals. As the buildings were not used for teaching, the buildings were used to provide more beds and more UT units, intensive therapy units, so as to prepare for the peak of the circulation of the virus and the amount of people infected. There were campaigns for prevention and support. They created contents for the people so that they can deal with the safety measures. And as well, they provided artistic and cultural content because I will say it again, we are under isolation since the 20th of March. That's a lot of time and we have to deal with that. And regarding research, quickly, the universities that are part and a structure of the S&T and E system, science, technology, and innovation, they started to produce medical equipment, sanitizing supplies. They provided personnel for health activities, especially the students of health careers and programs. We conducted studies on social impacts of the pandemics, regarding inequality, regarding psychological issues, so on and so forth. And we are champions, as I said, in participating on these collaborative networks for finding the test, for finding the vaccine and for doing and providing tests for the population to see if we had or not COVID. And regarding internationalization, as I mentioned, we suspended the mobilities. And what we had to do by hand, because there is not a unified registry, is to start counting and seeing who was abroad. This is something that the ones that we are specialized in internationalization of higher education in Latin America knows a lot. There are no records, no overall and full records of who is abroad, who is in the country, and what we can do for them. So we had to do this activity really quickly, and we have provided some funds to repatriate and to help Argentinian citizens abroad or foreigners in Argentina. Had to do this also. We provided aid also to foreign students and teachers that were in Argentina during the crisis. So, the emerging issues. I would like to say only 3 things of this slide. The most critical issue regarding teaching and training has to do with we should start to discuss how to regulate distant education. This is one of the taboo issues of our countries, as the limits with providing a services and assuring a human right is very narrow, and it is a gray area. We have to start talking about distance education and regulate it with a strong role of the state. Some things that arose regarding research and community engagement had to do with how a peripheric or underdeveloped country as Argentina inserts or contributes to research, to global research networks from an autonomous position instead of scientific dependence. And then only something that our president and our system as a whole is very keen on is the idea of the ethical question of the vaccine. Who will be shot first? Who will it be commercialized? Will it be for free? How are we going to deal with the results of this research innovation and research activity? And finally, regarding internationalization, I will only mention the idea that was said by Kumar. The role are universities and science and technology complex have regarding addressing global problems, climate change, and this health and sanitary situation as well. So regarding, finally, this is my last slide. We are not under a health crisis. We are not under an economic crisis only. As one of our professor, and he's currently the president of the Fundación Carolina of Spain, the Carolina Foundation, which provides scholarships for students to go to Spain and Spanish people to go abroad, says we are experiencing a development crisis. So if we are under a development crisis, the solution has to do with tackling development, discussing development, and this is what Kumar said. We have the SDGs, the 2030 agenda this is the last of the idea, to tackle these issues. And universities have a key role dealing with most of all these SDGs, not only the one regarding the SDG 4 of education, but research activities, community engagement, the articulation with other actors have to do with all the SDGs. So even though we have some opportunities for higher education governance at the national levels that I will not discuss with this Argentinian idea, and we are undergoing a reform policy of higher education law, I will talk about how we should understand this new geopolitics of knowledge production, how regional integration for us, for countries like us, is very important. Especially we are a founding member of Mercosur, but also regarding university, higher education, and science and technology, Argentina is one of the leader countries providing regional public goods. International cooperation proved for us that can be done under what Kumar said: reciprocity, solidarity, friendship. It may seem like idealistic, but we proved to be on the right side of the history and on the way, how to deal with the situation. And I started my presentation saying that we have a care state in Argentina because caring for the health, caring for the economy, caring for our citizens is the first priority. We should start trying to think about the care diplomacy. Not only we talk a lot about science diplomacy and how the landscape has changed and so on and so forth, but I will not say science or universities are the only actors. I think that the idea of care diplomacy can show this idea of symmetry, solidarity, and dealing locally and regionally with global issues, and that our universities, our higher education institutions, have a key role. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Naila. You know, when you said that Argentina is not a developed country, I remember the historical data. In the year 1900, the third richest country in the world per capita income was Argentina. It was among the richest countries in the world. Anyway, I've been very generous with you on time, so now we'll have to really quicken up our pace. Our next speaker is Dr. Santishri Pandit. She's a professor at the Department of Politics and Public Administration at the Savitribai Phule University in Pune. She's a member of many professional bodies. I will not name them. She'll be speaking to us on pandemics and paradigm shifts, post-COVID world order, and new geopolitics. Professor Pandit, over to you. 13, 14, 15 minutes.
Thank you, Chairperson.
You have got muted. You are muted. You started well, then it got muted. I don't know why.
Respected Chairperson and my dear panelists, let me at the outset thank the Water Policy Center, Aurangabad, and its team for this conference seminar. I would like thank Ambassador Kumar to have flagged several issues. Would like to move on from it because one is I wanted to ask the question whether pandemics create paradigm shifts. The only pandemic that created, many people say this is not a pandemic, it's a catastrophe. The Spanish flu and the First World War. You had a huge change in the international order. Will this, especially, we are debating on the origins of the virus, whether it's natural or a lab-created virus. Is it an instrument of biological warfare? And from that, because many people say that it is from the Wuhan military lab, there are conflictual issues that are coming in. So the first issue is as COVID-19 has changed the present world order, given it a major strategic shock. And if we see these dramatic effects our everyday life, global prosperity, and international security. Its geopolitical implications could be even more profound than we think at this time. Into the pandemic, if we see, it has shattered the global health security, devastated the world economy, and accelerated great power rivalry. The second point I would like to flag here is it a tectonic shift in the way we think about the international order? We have had anthropocentric theories that have come from the West. Should we then move to Indo-centric views, like the nature-centric views? One view I would like to flag here is the view of the Panchabhutas, that ancient Indian philosophy and Buddhist philosophy always respected that the smallest of creatures have their place in the universe. Is this environmental degradation and devastation and climate change also a part of the problem? So we as human beings and as theoreticians of the international relations have to change many of these narratives that we have been used to. I think it's very important that we have more narratives from the developing world of Latin America, Africa, and Asia. The third point that I would like to bring in is the COVID crisis has brought in. See, India has been a democracy for 73 years. Until this crisis came in, democracy was never seen as a strategic asset. Today, India is seen as a democratic asset because India and China are the only two civilizational states to enter the fourth industrial revolution. And here I would like to contest a theory that has been put forward, saying that India has been a successful democracy or an oasis of democracy, not because of the British rule in India. Why then Myanmar, Pakistan, several other ruled states are not democracies? I think the credit should go more to the Indian political culture, which is in the celebration of diversity. The concept of Ekam Sat Vipraha Bahuda Vadanti, meaning truth may be one, but there are several parts to it. The very fact that we respect diversity, we respect difference, and we think it's very beautiful. The other issue which I would like to do is what the last two speakers raised, a very important issue, especially Ambassador Kumar and my earlier speaker, the issue of the state. there is no retreat of the state. There were fears given by many writers of international relations that there is a retreat of the state. I would rather say there is a transformation of the state. The COVID crisis is bringing in or returning the welfare state, something that we never had all these. We had it earlier, but then there was a contestation, especially during the period of globalization, whether the state would return. And here the welfare state has come to become very important, especially even in most developing countries where we have. So the and vis-a-vis India, I would like to bring in that this new COVID crisis, which has made a paradigm shift, is brought out a new normal in India's foreign and defense policy. Our relations with China, as well as the capability of the Indian state in bringing in its citizens, the Vande Bharat missions. I think we have been one of the few countries which took such a huge man-made mission to bring our people back into the country. The vaccine wars is another thing. A competition that we see with the new geopolitics is the vaccine wars. You have different countries fighting. You have Russia already, which has gone ahead with the vaccine. In the US, I don't think the vaccine will come out till the elections are over. They seem to be more divided than we in India are. And the other question I'm more worried is will the vaccine be available to all and accessible, meaning can we pay for it? Or is it going to be so expensive that it is not going to be in the reach of many of the poor or the, of the world? This is the other issue that I want to raise. The issue with higher education, I'm very happy you raised, because I also belong to the University of Pune, which is now renamed as Savitribai Phule, Pune University, is the digital divide. We also have online lectures, but let me tell you, many of my students cannot access these because they don't have the instruments, even a mobile phone. So it is a question of haves and have-nots. So we are creating another new inequality in the digital world. How will we be able to bridge this digital divide is an extremely important issue that I would like to raise here. And my last point, sir, would be the primacy of the political. What this COVID war has brought in is the primacy of the political. To a large extent, saying that economics will have to work with the political. It is the political that is going to take primacy, and politics and economics would have to work together. That is, power is extremely important, and political power will be more important because that is the way they could reach out in the state doing it. And finally, I want to have a word on geopolitics, that is, the defining steps of a new geopolitical order after the coronavirus crisis seems to include certain three key issues. First of all, it is necessary to address the speculation on COVID-19. If the coronavirus is lab-made or an out-of-control science experiment. Countries that suffer from this pandemic will demand compensation from the country or countries that caused it. Even if the coronavirus catastrophe was sparked as a result of natural changes in microorganisms, then the countries affected by the virus may still seek to claim compensation from the country or countries responsible, since they have not taken measures on time. The other issue when we talk of the geopolitical order is all that has happened in the course of the catastrophe, not the pandemic, I would call it a catastrophe, should be the warning to all countries against any possible biological terror attacks in the future. I somehow think we in the international community, except for the United States, have been extremely civil and courteous in saying things. So there's an urgent need to expand state capacities in case of such attacks is evident. Laboratories that conduct biological research may be asked to be more transparent and ready to be monitored by an international mechanism. The establishment of an institution like the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, and regular inspection of such laboratories could be a critical step. This, I would think, is extremely. And finally, a word on the Quad. There have been realignments in the region, especially the region that we call the Indo-Pacific. And India has been playing a major role with USA, Australia, Japan, and India's relations with Taiwan also have taken a major change due to the recent COVID crisis and the way China has behaved. Finally, I would only say that the coronavirus pandemic has exposed, like no crisis before, just how difficult it has become now for great powers to come to a common agreement. So is the future world order going to be more conflictual, more nationalistic than cooperative? Is globalization of the international economy taking a retreat rather than the state? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brother Pandit. Thank you very much. You see some common themes running between the three speakers we've had, and yet some changes, different perspectives. I'm noting it. I'll come back to it later on. As I said, I'd rather speak at the end. Next speaker is Dr. Ivan Pacheco. He's a research fellow, Center for International Higher Education at Boston College. He's from Colombia, and he'll be speaking to us on COVID-19 and higher education, challenges and opportunities from a Latin American perspective. So in that sense, we are getting one more Latin American perspective coming out in this session. So over to you, Dr. Pacheco. Your 14, 15 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see.
Okay.
If you can just bring the entire maximum screen, it's just that we don't see the sidebars, you know? Yeah, right there.
Okay. So, no, wait a minute.
No, it's not a minute.
No, wait, that's better. So, well, first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. It has been really exciting to participate here. So this is what I want to address in this short presentation. I want to give you an overview of Colombia. So, although my title said a Latin American perspective, and I think that was overreaching. So I will focus just on Colombia with very short snapshots to what may happen in other Latin American countries, but the main focus will be Colombia. That's my country. So we'll have first an overview of the country, then I will guide you through a very short trip for the first reactions, both from the government and higher education institutions during the first month of the pandemic. Then we will go through the challenges that institutions and the government faced during that time and afterwards. How was the negotiation process among the different actors, and looking to the future, what we have. So Colombia is a medium-sized country in the north of Latin America. It has an estimated number of 50.3 million inhabitants, not so big compared to India, but still one of the largest in Latin America. And our enrollment in higher education for 2018 was 2.4 million students, evenly distributed between public and private institutions. Although the number of private higher education institutions is larger, which is kind of common for many countries with dual public-private systems. Since April 2020, since April this year, we are members of the OECD, which may speak well about our economy and development. But on the other hand, our Gini coefficient is 49.7, meaning that we are one of the most unequal countries in the world. So that's a big challenge that we need to address. So now let me take you through the first reaction using a very simple timeline. And it starts on March 11, when the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. The next day, the Colombian president declared, like the government, declared a health emergency. And that very same day, there was a joint statement by the Ministry of Education and different higher education institutions, organizations. We will talk later about this joint statement. 10 days later, the Ministry of Education issued a set of guidelines on the use of technology for education. 2 days later, the country was immersed in a full lockdown and a quarantine that lasted until September 1st, just a few weeks ago. And on April 8th, there were some guidelines from the government. Actually, there was a new law regarding standardized testing, a waiver, because it was supposed to be a mandatory requirement to access higher education. And if you see there's a yellow section on Easter vacation, and that's important because that made it easier for higher education institutions to enter the quarantine mode and gave them some time to adapt for this challenge. So let's talk about the shared statement. And please remember the organizations that are here. I have, in addition to the education, the Ministry of Education, we have ASCUN, SUE, and the TTU network. We will go back to these institutions later. Now, in the statement, the government and higher education institutions said that they will work together to address the challenges of the emergency. The second thing that they did was acknowledging that higher education institutions had already done much for fighting or contributing to avoid the negative impact of the pandemic. But at the same time, the autonomy of higher education institutions was recognized. And in our country, autonomy has like a very strong tradition, and you, as a government, you should not mess with it. But finally, despite their autonomy, higher education institutions said, because, well, they have to, that they will follow general and specific measures to address the pandemic. The general measures are basically the same as in many other countries. The sector-specific measures, including canceling events of more of 500 people, then this number went shrinking to 50 and then to none, limiting international mobility, establishing a sanitary vigilance system, strengthening virtual education, which to be more technical and detailed, it was not virtual education, it was remote education, and providing remote student services whenever it was possible, services like library, counseling, or any other service that the institution had. So as Dr. Perrotta said before, higher education institutions in Colombia, as in many other countries in Latin America, deliver services to their communities, both to their internal communities and to the external communities through outreach. And these services included from food or equipment for students and teachers, passing by psychological support to students abroad, general information on the pandemic, and I mean, many other things. And very similar things for in terms of outreach, food and supply, psychological support, exercise, entertainment, as Dr. Perrotta mentioned before. And of course, there were research played a significant role in all of this. And I would say that almost every single university and most of higher education institutions contributed somehow. Research included medical research, epidemiological research, research on economics, on legal aspects. So there was a lot of research done or made visible during this time. And there was a call, this Mincienciaton was a call for proposal from the Ministry of Science. And the Ministry of Science is different to the Ministry of Education, but they were looking for tools that could be used to fight the pandemic challenge, including technology or processes or monetary systems. It was for $7 million, which isn't a lot of money, but was a significant amount of money. And the lines of research included public health, diagnostic systems, monitoring, etc. So this was just one way in which the government articulated with higher education institutions. However, this call for proposals was not targeted only to higher education institutions. Actually, it was open to the public, but most of the proposals and had at least one partner who was a higher education institution. And there was more in terms of technological development. Here you have 4 examples that I took from the website from ASCUN, which is the Association of Colombian Universities. And what you see here are technological developments that were aimed at helping with fighting the pandemic, including depressurized isolation chambers, patient isolation chambers, thermal cameras, vital equipment monitoring. At the website of ASCUN, they put together a list of examples. It doesn't pretend to be a comprehensive list. It's just a list of examples of what universities has done. It covered not just technology or research, but outreach and many other possible contributions. But the list goes over 300 examples of what institutions have done in this moment. So that was like the good part, but there were challenges, as all of you know, because all of us have lived it. The first one was remote education. And like Argentina, as presented by Dr. Perota, Colombia had a more favorable approach to higher education, to virtual higher education. There's a growing enrollment rate in virtual education in the country. And right now, I think we are in at 20% of our global enrollment, our total enrollment comes from distance education. There's a favorable regulatory environment. And when the crisis started, the Ministry of Education launched a project called Plan Padrino, Sponsored Plan, in which a university that had good development on virtual and distance education will mentor another higher education institution so they could be able to deliver remote education to their own students. So that was our first challenge. The second challenge is the same one you will see in your institutions, and is the challenge of inequality. Inequality acted just like a magnifying glass, and it made this inequality, the pandemic acted as a magnifying glass, and the financial inequalities, access inequalities just grew bigger and were more visible. And for some students, even when their classes were online, as some of you have mentioned before, it meant that they weren't able to get access to all what they have to do for their classes. Then one of the fears was declining enrollment. So national enrollment in higher education was already declining before the pandemic at a very slow rate, but was already declining. The initial estimates for drop off in higher education, in private higher education mostly, was between 25 and 50%. Those numbers turn out to be inflated, And the actual decline at this point is estimated in approximately 10%. There are no definitely numbers yet. And that was possible through tuition discounts, student loans, and the family efforts. So financing was the third problem, either in terms of demand, students were asking for free tuition, tuition discounts, student loans, or for supplies. I mean, financing for higher education institutions, who were asking for institution loans, student loans, resources from government, or tax exceptions. And then it started what it was like really a negotiation process involving the government, higher education institutions, and the students. But it finally ended in the government because neither higher education institutions or students had enough money to address it. Needless to say, the government didn't have enough money either. So student activism took an important role here. And I have here some snapshots from press from Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. It was kind of generalized in the region. Higher education institutions, remember the institutions I mentioned before, the associations, now they were asking for a financial component, better connectivity, fee waiver for their students. The government granted payroll protection loans, student loan relief, and support for students. So looking to the future, and this is my last one, student retention will continue to be an issue in our context. The institution survival, mostly for private higher education institutions, is still a challenge. The redefinition of quality assurance, which I didn't mention, but in terms of what is quality assurance, what is distance education, how are the visits on quality assurance be conducted, and so on. The challenge is how to capitalize all this knowledge, all that research from this last month, how to make it for having a better society. And finally, are we looking for a new model for higher education in which face-to-face or in-person education is just one more instrument to deliver higher education? So I think I'm just in my 15 minutes, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pacheco. I think many of the issues you raised resonates very well here. Of course, the scale is different and income levels are different, but many of it does resonate with us very, very strongly. And in fact, our last speaker in one sense will be complementing what some of you have been saying. Is our last speaker is Mr. Krishna. Where is my phone gone? My phone has all the details. And he worked for Microsoft and looks after digital transformation and strategies. So may I now request Mr. Where my phone has packed up, unfortunately, Mr. Raj Krishnan. So I'm not able to get your full designation, your long designation, which had, I know, strategies, and it had digital transformation and that, right?
Yes.
So may I request you to take over.
All right. I just want to make sure you can hear me. You can see my screen.
Loud and clear. Your screen is very clear and your voice is clear.
All right. Hello. And, I've been just looking for a most appropriate multi-time zone greeting, which I haven't been able to find. So I'm just going to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. For me, it's actually morning. So somebody muted me.
For a fraction of a second, you're there. Otherwise, it must be very early in the morning in Chicago.
Yes, it's so the thing is, I'm about half awake, and most of you may be half asleep, and this is the last session. So I couldn't ask for a better way to present my conference. So let me just go, I think, start with my presentation. All right. So what I thought I'd do is I have about 3 sections. The first one is just giving how universal it is, which we all know, just to give you the magnitude, and then how industries are coping up in terms of handling such a universal pandemic. And my second thing is based on my expertise, which is the supply chain, how supply chain has been impacted by this pandemic and what changes are happening there. And then finally, everything kind of depends on the health. So I just wanted to share my opinion about the containment and the health scenarios. So this is, I think we all agree.
Your voice is breaking up a bit. Your voice is breaking up a little bit. I wonder why. Is it my system which is problematic?
Yes,
I don't know.
That. Yeah, I think
It's actually from Rajput, so I think he has some network issues.
Yeah, that's right. It's occurring at your end. It's not occurring here. Some reverberations, some background. What should I say? Bounce back.
Okay, let me see if I can stop sharing my video and. Okay, is this a little better?
Yes, it is.
Okay, for some reason, when I'm using Zoom, I seem to have this problem. Okay, is it clear now, or you're still?
Very clear, very, very clear. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I think I just shut down my video. Okay. Let's see. I'm sure I'll get to the content. Okay, so one thing we all agree is that this is a disaster unlike any other, right? Even your grandfather or your uncle who always tells you they've seen everything, even they admit they have not seen anything like this, right? The other day, I just after about 6 months, I went to a movie theater because they just opened the movie house, and then I went to see Tenet, the blockbuster. And when the lights went off and when I sat and then the IMAX sound just came on, I just realized how I was deprived of such small pleasures because of this pandemic. And then I looked around, there were 12 people in the theater, in spite of all the precautions. It has affected us in every aspect of our life, right? I saw the other day in the news where a student taking a college course, and then she did not have internet connectivity, and then she goes to McDonald's, and obviously McDonald's is, the free internet is not geared for streaming or that kind of a workload. And she said, I'm just quitting. I'm just leaving this course. So it is affecting all of us. Even in the clothing, people are now, they're buying, their sizes have changed. And some of them, the sizes have gone down because they're exercising heavily because of the time available. But most of the people are getting into bigger size, and even at our home, we never used to have pizzas and things like this, but we are ordering more of those. It is affecting us in every aspect of our life. So there's no doubt about that. And when you look at the sectoral impact, clearly the leisure and hospitality industry is probably one of the most affected. Like for example, in Chicago, they have started, playing baseball and football. But the biggest aspect, which is the crowd, is not there. So the hot dog vendors, the bars, and they're not seeing, in spite of some kind of normalcy, they're not seeing that. The retail trade is one of the things that's affected very heavily. The manufacturing, so there is a difference between vulnerability and disruptiveness, right? The reason manufacturing is, still good because people still need goods. Like for example, if you look at craft, even there you can see the social trend, right? They used to have a reduction in mac and cheese, which is considered unhealthy. So people were just going for healthy food, but now suddenly it has reversed. So there's a big production of manufacturing of mac and cheese now. They've increased that line. So manufacturing is probably not affected in terms of output or the demand, but it is definitely affected by the disruptiveness in terms of the supply chain, right? So these are all, and then the other factor, like someone mentioned, is that this, when we come out of all this, how is it going to look like? I think people have a lot of concerns around that. Now, from a technology thing, what we are seeing is, we say that industries are responding in 3 different phases. One is react. So as soon as this happened, immediately people started, finding ways to work. Like for Microsoft, for example, we just about a year, are you still hearing a little? Okay.
Yes.
We introduced.
It did come out a little bit, but you're back to okay.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear?
It's there, but you're visibly okay. We can hear you. But that critical sound somehow comes every now and then, In between, you are very clear, but it's all right. We can still hear you well enough. Don't worry.
Okay. Yeah. So we introduced tools like virtual desktop. What it means is that you can use any cheap computer, your Chromebook or anything, but you can log into the cloud where your robust company certified machine is running in the cloud. And we saw an extreme growth in that business because now, instead of buying solid computer for everyone and securing it, a lot of people went into that. And as you know, the success of Zoom and all the virtual meetings, right? That is the immediate way to react. In the rebound is, I think someone mentioned in the previous thing is, it's not a question of whether you can do things remotely, but do you have the resources? Just look at what we are going through, right? I've always had problem with Zoom. My network bandwidth is not there. And what kind of speaker and microphone and camera should I have? There are enabling that some of the institutes in US actually are giving away computers because students do not have computers. I think somebody mentioned about lack of resources in all these countries. It's same in US. The rural areas, the internet connectivity is terrible. Students do not have computers. So it's not about remote education, but can you enable them? So there are a lot of effort trying to kind of supply the right things and providing the infrastructure. And then the control, the physical occupancy. So using contact tracing, using testing, and then having a system for space management so that you can actually have some people go into the buildings in a controlled manner. That's what we call the rebound stage. But then, like somebody mentioned in the previous talk, should we look at the whole thing differently? What should a higher education? Is face-to-face education, somebody mentioned, is it a one of the options rather than the only option? So how do you reimagine the whole workspace? How do you redesign? How do you work? Maybe 2 days you come to work. And then you need to also have measures. You might have seen some trends in the past, right? The telecommuting was losing its favor because people thought we have no clue what people are doing and there is no face-to-face communication. So if you recall a few months back, Yahoo said, no, everybody must come back to work. But now it's the reverse. And there are people saying some people will never come back to their office because this works will remain remote. And then, I recently listened to one of the energy companies said, we want to relook at our facility, right? We have so many fixed assets. Now, nobody in the building, we are spending money maintaining that. How do we optimize facility? So that's what we think about reimagine. Yes, this will have an impact in the future, how things are done. And now it's remote everything, right? So it's like now Walmart is looking at drone shipment. As you know, Amazon has a store without people using AI to track what you're buying. People are collaborating with Slack and Teams. So everything is remote learning. Now, from a supply chain perspective, which is my focus area, I just borrowed this shamelessly from one of the World Bank talk. So when you look at supply chain, there are 3 things in supply chain: flow of information, flow of funds, and flow of goods, right? Here, we're just focusing on flow of funds. But unlike the 2008 crisis, where the demand was affected, supply was okay. And then through some subsidies and the government moves, we were able to kind of bring up the demand, and we were relatively smooth transition. But this is unlike any other, where in 2 months, the entire demand and supply chain got disrupted, right? Everything is affected, from bankruptcies, from the multiple supply chains. Everything got broke at the same time. And this crisis is unlike any other. So both, like, another big difference between the 2008 and now is the interdependency of the countries in trade. Now, you may think you're buying something from Mexico, but Mexico depends on China for its raw materials. So there is a tremendous dependency between the countries, which makes this both from a value chain in terms of value added, as well as trade. There is so much interdependency. This is a major disruption in the supply chain. And then the top thing says containment policies and unusual recession, because the containment policies have tremendous impact in terms of how it'll impact the recession, which is what I just want to talk about next. So what is the challenge? I think the challenge is some of these things, right? Again, I borrowed this. It kind of talks about this. So there are three kinds of population: susceptible population, infectious population, and then the protected. Professor Rooney told me that unless you put some equations, people won't think it's a credible presentation. So I had to put some equation here. So this one is, what it's saying is that at the equilibrium of number of infectious contact per period per infected person times infection, and the S is the susceptible. That is the new cases. The gamma time infection is the recovery. So when both of them are equal, that is where, that equilibrium. Obviously, what we want is the number of infection less than, the recovery. Now, in this equilibrium state, based on the epidemiology and the statistics for COVID, that R0 is 2 or 3. Now, the beta is the number of infectious contact, right? That is the controllable factor that governments and other institutions can do. And if you just half the beta, then instead of half or 1/3, it could be 1/4 or 1/8. So there is a tremendous impact on the supply chain and everything that we do on the beta value, which is where the countries and the governments can have an impact. But when you look at the data, it is alarming. That beta is not going down. This is as of yesterday, from Johns Hopkins University, right? This is the trend. Look at everything going, nothing is coming down. It's unbelievable that we have 31 million cases globally. And one of the things is that this is maybe my personal opinion. I look at the pattern. Look at the countries. Look at the countries, and it is estimated in 2 months India will beat US based on the things, assuming the data we get from India is accurate. There's one trend I see, and it may be a political point of view, is the leadership, right? What I see is most of these countries where the cases are high, there is a refusal to believe that this is a real issue. And there's an attempt to politicize this issue. And there is no desire to use science to control and put the proper containment measures in place. There are, take Sweden, for example, they have taken a measure where it's a herd immunity. But when you look at that in the country, one of the things that they've done is that people listen to the government. When the government said, okay, we're not going to mandate masks, but we recommend that you reduce outdoor activities, and people listen. And then, so there's a role of government. Look at Germany or New Zealand. So it's not even a pattern. You cannot say it's a small population. Germany is a reasonable size of population. Definitely leadership in what the government does has a major impact. Now, finally, I think the person that I admire, I just wanted to close with this. This is universal, but it is more important at this time of the crisis. And I saw her deliver this in an interview, and it resonates with me so much. And she said, one lives not just for oneself, but for one's community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raj. Thank you very much, Raj. Yes, we live for our communities, and there are many issues. We should have made an announcement earlier on to our audience that they could that they can put in their questions, but there haven't been any questions so far other than a few compliments. I think what we did see across today was lots of that things consistently coming through. One is the role of the state. Two, that leadership counts, that things are making a difference, that politics is very important. And therefore, I'm linking the two, leadership and politics. Politics is very important, that politics counts, that whether it's economics, whether it's other factors, it is the political intent which is important. And too long, we've thought of ourselves, our societies, as being technocratic. It's possibly wrong. In fact, I would argue it is very, very wrong. Not that it should not be efficient, but if efficiency leads to a situation where your Gini coefficient goes through the roof, then your societies are in deep trouble. And therefore, deprivation is bad, but for social stability, we've seen that actually relative deprivation could actually be worse. This is not to argue in favor of everybody being uniformly poor. No, not at all. We obviously have to strive for a much better world. But this world itself was changing, and with this new shock that has come, it is a pandemic. It is more than whether it can be compared with Spanish flu. One is a terrible name. The first Spanish were not responsible for the flu. They just get better records. For the USA at war did not, and Spain being a neutral did. A bad rap for it. Or well back in history, the Black Death, the plague. Change led to what is now we call modernization, led to industrialization, led to institutional change, joint stock companies, parliamentary democracies, etc. That was a humongous thing, but of course that lasted a long time. And human life was very, very scarce, since that you lost 1/3 of the population of many societies. So before I have something, as anybody in the audience would like to say something, or raise a question or something, can you raise your hand or put in a question? Or should I, in the meantime, address? I think I'll go back to our first speaker, Ambassador Mohan Kumar. Mohan, okay, Ruston, there's a question for Ruston. And his question is, with respect to the current pandemic, could you renewable resources and non-renewable resources be elaborated? And this question is asking to Ambassador Mohan Kumar. So Mohan, over to you. Would you like to answer that?
Right. So my sense is that if you want to accept that a crisis should never be wasted, a crisis also offers an opportunity. And if you are starting from ground zero, like India, after a couple of months, our economy has tanked and everything, I like the way the government is going about reforms, for example, agricultural reforms, labor reforms. Similarly, it is my sense that if we can, those of us who haven't made this quantum jump from a coal-based economy to an economy which can be carbon neutral, I think this is the time to do it. You can really make that big jump. So for me, the coronavirus or the COVID-19 offers an opportunity for countries to go towards a new Green Deal, a new green economy. And I think India can do it. We have already made strides insofar as our intended nationally determined contributions are concerned with regard to the Paris Agreement. The one thing I remember is, since I was in Paris and we were asked to indicate a peak year for emissions, and we were reluctant to do it because obviously with 30 to 40% of the people still not having 24/7 electricity or power, we couldn't do it. But it seems to me that COVID will accelerate the trend towards a new green economy. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you, Shakti.
So, sir, do you mean to say that COVID is actually an advantage regarding this electricity and other sources?
I think if I could just jump in, as you said, Mohan was saying, never waste an opportunity. It was terrible. It's not an advantage. Having got into the position, what should we do? So in that sense, and building on that, and this is where I would like to ask both our friends from the Americas, from Cartagena or Colombia and from Buenos Aires, Dr. Both you talked about how strong your public university system is. In Argentina, of course, the enrollment rate seems to be very high, maybe not so in Colombia, publicly funded, autonomy, etc. How does that impact, let me say, in terms of the adoption of better, more inclusive social policies without, sometimes we adopt so-called social policies that promote equality at the cost of economic growth. Now, of course, Colombia has a long history of the civil war, which is the longest possibly. So obviously that's complicated situations. But how does a society like that going forward is able to leverage on the manpower, the human beings who have been through the university system, the women and the men, how do you leverage that into promoting and creating a more inclusive society? A question to both of you. Whether it is Dr. Pacheco or Dr. Daniela Perota, whoever one of you wants to start first.
Okay, Daniela,
Ivan, you can go first if you want.
We have a saying, you first, and then nobody starts. Daniela, why don't you start?
Okay, so I don't know if I understand completely the question, Shakti. What actually would be the main issue you want me to answer? Or is it
okay, let's clarify it. You have a very strong public university system.
Yes.
You also have a strong research system, though separate and at some point you come together. It's publicly funded.
Yes.
And it's open to all, no admissions test. And yet, at the end of the day, how do you leverage that into creating a society which is more equal and therefore more stable, without resorting to crude populism that kills economic growth? So not at the cost of economic growth, but how do you make it more inclusive to reduce inequality in society going forward?
Yeah. Okay, well, if I understand, I know what you mean, but when I speak in these sessions, I always said that being an Argentinian, it's quite not difficult, but I have to make more things clear or clearer because the rest of the world, with some exceptions, mainly, for example, if I was speaking with an Uruguayan, they would be on the same trend as me. But what I mean to say, our education culture, our educational tradition, and this includes universities, and this includes the scientific and technological environment, is truly public. And it is very rooted in our society, the idea of public education, national education, right to education at the all levels. So it is a society that developed and social mobility has to do with it, with the idea of a system that make more homogeneous our country. This relates to our immigrations waves of the 19th century as from our independence, and then the migration, how the country was created and how different traditions were merged into our country. So it is a long-standing history of how we envision ourselves, our education system, and our universities. So universities and access to higher education is massive, and this relates to a more inclusive and inclusive society, or at least opportunities for everyone. One of the most innovative policies of the last decade was to create one university in each state, and especially in this in the surrounding metropolitan area of the city of Buenos Aires, where most of the population is, and especially there, these universities have received first generation students. So universities are a key factor in providing people more opportunities for the labor market, for improving themselves, for cultural assistance, so on and so forth. So universities play a crucial role. Nevertheless, as we have some constraints regarding the economy and some particularities of the country and the idea that we are an underdeveloped country or a semi-peripheral country, lots of things need to be done as well. So everyone can enter, but the huge policy measure and the most broader political measure that we need to take into account is how to make those students be on the system and graduate. So there is a difference between entering and graduating. That is one of the, and I have to be very careful with this because there is a branch of scholarship, and of course with a political biases, that says that this is a problem. On the other hand, some people I say that even though you do not graduate, university provides you with skills that are important for your life, not for employment and for your daily life. So we as a country created the condition for massive attendance to higher education. The next step is how to retain those students, especially in these conditions, and how to make them graduate. So if you look at the graduation rates, we have some issues there. It is expected. So if everyone can enter because there are no exams, it is not meritocratic, but it is egalitarian. So that's one thing to say. But we have expanded the system of the university system and the scientific and technological system as well. One of the key measures of the last government, the previous government, the Cristina Fernandez and Néstor Kirchner's government measure was to provide more scholarships for conducting PhDs in the country and researchers. So we have one of the most advanced as well scientific and technological systems of the regions. And we have to cope with this thing, with this, they are not weaknesses, they are things to be solved by the by politics and the state. So that's the key question. I have a question here. Have the forces of liberalization not impacted your government adopt privatization as it has in the most developing countries? Well, as I mentioned, the higher education system is so packed, and autonomy and the idea of public good is so rooted in ourselves, in our academic culture, in our society, that liberalization forces they do enter, but they did not enter as in other countries. It's not Argentina is not like Chile, it's not like Brazil, it's not like Colombia either. We have been able to leverage those pressures, especially by strong political mobilization of the actors of the system. Higher education institutions, deans, students, professors, and the society as well. I was recalling that 2 years ago, with the previous administration, who was a right-wing government, we had a massive university mobilization regarding the right to higher education and asking for financing for universities. It was one of the biggest social mobilizations of our recent history regarding higher education. So there are forces pressing, but there are some actors of the system that try to leverage those pressures. For example, in Argentina, for a private institution to settle, it has to be approved by a national commission of accreditation and evaluation of universities. So there are not, private universities do not pop up as in other countries. There are strong regulations that allows us to control that the growing of that sector. Of course, the most privatized sector of university is the postgraduate programs. That's where the market is, and especially under financed activities, the links between industry and university becomes more blur. The frontier is more blur. But compared to other systems within the region, we have a more publicly and protected system that relates to our tradition. We cannot explain the Argentinian case without understanding how the state was created and how what university represents for our people at all levels.
We'll come back to you. Even when you answer my question, there's also a question whether how do you make policies in education in a very diverse society, But yes, first, of course, is the question of how do you leverage higher education to make for a more inclusive society.
For me or for Ivan?
No,
for
Mr. Pacheca, Ivan.
Well, this is not just a problem of poor countries or developing countries. This is one of the main questions of public policies in education. But I don't know how you do it. I know what people have tried to do to achieve that goal, because clearly we haven't been very successful at doing that. But while higher education is considered still a social mobility avenue, and it is highly rooted, at least in middle class and lower class in Colombia, and it's highly regarded. So the policies focus right now in two main issues in Colombia. One is quality, actually three issues: quality, access, and financing. And those are considered like the iron triangle, not just for education, but for many other public services. All the efforts to expand access to higher education may have an impact in quality. If you expand the base of people incoming higher education, it may affect the quality of the education they will serve. And I mean, we can make a whole event just on this question, but I would say that the focus has been expanding access by allowing people to enter higher education, either by financing the provision of higher education through public universities, or the demand of higher education through tuition. That combined with guaranteeing good quality education. The underlying assumption is that by providing good quality education for a larger number of people, that will translate into a more development and a more equal and fair society. However, that has not been achieved yet. At least not in Colombia, though through access to education, you can see that there's some economic mobility. But I mean, I know the time is limited, so I'll stop here.
Okay, thank you. In fact, it's a lot of questions are being raised, but I'll not get stop on that point. There are obviously issues of equity, but there's also a trade-off between efficiency in that sense of public finance and the strangulation of economic growth by stressing on equity at the cost of economic growth, which has happened in Latin America, which has definitely happened in Argentina historically. But my system is backing up. Hello.
Yes,
hello.
Audible.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm losing it. Anyway, so I would request Shanti Pandit to just quickly, very quickly in 1 minute, tell us something about how Quad would make a difference in this part of the world in terms of containing breakdown of tensions, in containing the growth of tensions and preventing breakdown of the established order. Dr. Pandit, could you just quickly touch on it? Because that's a good, you had raised the point.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha. Thank you so much. First thing I would say is one of the geopolitical impacts of the present COVID pandemic is attempt of destabilizing the present order, both politically, economically, as well as in military sense. So looking at this, whether we are going to replace the American neoliberal dominant order with a Chinese, or China is attempting to be the new global power. There is no, I don't think they are hiding their ambitions in any way. The question is, from an Indo-Indian point of view, what would we from India prefer? What is good for us? It's a choice between the devil and the deep sea. I would say that India would anyway prefer the present order continuing. And if you have to contain, China from its very ambitious nationalistic and militaristic ambitions, we had a good taste of it on our border in June and others. So it is very important that India is not a great power. I would rather say India is a swing state, a state that joins any side and then makes a difference. Mm-hmm. And here I would say that it is very important and strategically, realistic for India to join with other powers. The present situation has woken up, especially the eyes of countries like Australia, Taiwan, and Japan. Japan had already mentioned about the alliance with the United States and with India on the other side. So this whole concept of the Quad in the Indo-Pacific is extremely important. It brings back an old concept of international relations in George Kennan, that is containment. Mm-hmm. And containment of China is extremely vital for India's security. I don't think we may, whatever friendship, Hindi, Chini, bhai we do, it is not very realistic, because China would not like to have any, any idea or anywhere near to a peer status with India. We are rivals by the very nature of our geography and geopolitics, and I think we should wake up to this. That is why I would say, even in foreign policy, we have to change to a Kshatriya foreign policy. Thank you, Shakti.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to wind up in the next 3 minutes or 4. So I would just quickly like two people, both Raj and Mohan, to give in their 30 seconds bit, and then I'll speak for a minute or 2, and then we can wind up this session to respond to many of the things said. And Raj was raising points as questions also on the education thing. I think Raj should respond to the question that he raised. And Mohan, so 30 seconds each, and then we'll wind up. Raj, first you, and then Mohan.
Oh, so do you want me to, like, in terms of the education?
Then you raised a very good point with Daniela, so I thought you should quickly touch on it,
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, it's a big challenge in United States, right? The cost of education is extremely high, but then the quality of education is also very good. Now, one of the things that they are trying to do in US is the states are trying to promote the low-income people. Like, for example, in Chicago, the mayor came up with a thing that if you are from low income and minority, your college education in the community college will be free, right? So to me, I don't know if I have the solutions. How do you maintain high quality education, and how do you make it equitable so that all the people have the opportunity? It is a challenge. I think the US is on one extreme, and then some other countries are in the other extreme. There must be a way, like we used to have Reverend Jackson, who said that the school system should not be based on taxing, right? I live in an affluent area, great school system. Low income area, terrible school system. How can you improve a country when your education system is based on income, right? I think they need to find education as a universal thing where there should be a common pool of fund for making education equal, giving opportunities to people. That's
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mohan, could you quickly, 30 seconds, answer your question on the SDGs, climate change? Will the pandemic make a difference to achieving these goals?
So thanks, Shakti. So I genuinely think the COVID merely accelerated the trends that were evident before the COVID. So I think I would advise against treating this as BC and AC, before Corona and after Corona. That would be a mistake. Secondly, I do believe that the old liberal international order is pretty much over. We are looking at a messy period in geopolitical relations where I think the states which are nimble, which are strong, and which take risks, they will make it. And the states which are conservative and they keep going back to their own thinking, they will fail. This is broadly my view. And therefore, I think states have to shun the kind of thinking that used to dominate their foreign policy. Try to think out of the box and see what is good for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me quickly, Rasa, before you say thank you, let me just speak for a minute. Thank you very much. I think it was a very thought-provoking things. Not everything said was I would agree with, but it was worthwhile to listen and really create ideas in your brain. I agree with Mohan that this is not AC and BC. This is not something. But of course, the trouble with history, change in history is, while you're in the change, you don't notice it. It's only after the change that you notice how momentous the change was. An inflection point can never be predicted. Never. Having said that, there are certain things changing. The role of the state has become very, very important. Absolutely. I don't think that anybody can doubt about it. But how does the state react to it? And I'm a little hesitant in giving good marks to states very quickly. States which we thought were very good in the first part of the first few months of Corona, later didn't prove to be so good after all. And sometimes comparisons are unfair. A small island country which can cut itself off and a land-based country with open all around obviously face very, very different challenges in terms of isolating people. A country with a high per capita income can isolate itself much longer, where 40%, 90% of your labor is surviving on non-formal work, without a contract, without a salary. You obviously react differently. So, the matrices of judgment don't become too American, don't become too quantification is required, but don't get bogged down with too early in the game. We are still learning. We don't know what is happening. What policies have we adopted in the past is going to serve us. Now, in India on education, and there, Saraswati, I disagree with the point you raised. We have stressed, at our level of per capita income, which is just over $2,000 before the pandemic, $2,400 or so per capita income, with 25% enrollment in higher education of the relevant cohort, age cohort. It's remarkably high. In the last 10 years, our higher education has shot up. Now it will stagger, it will fall a little bit, because not the cost of education, the opportunity cost of education. So for us, it is not the tuition fee which is important, it is the opportunity cost. Can parents afford to let the children study, or should they go out and work and support the family? Those are real issues. But I think the countries which are able to, and that's the question I was raising to my friends from the Americas, is that the country which is able to leverage its educated workforce into solving problems, into developing innovative solutions, into getting out of old mindsets, whether education should be done completely online, completely contactless, or a combination. How much of brick mortar do you need? How do offices work? Again, I've seen kids in America go to Starbucks and sit in the corner. Starbucks always has the two very comfortable chairs in the corner with their homeworks and the computers open, and spend hours and hours there. Because unlike McDonald's, the Starbucks Wi-Fi is slightly better, right? How much can you do it? To what extent? Issues of you should do it because you want to democratize education, but can your students afford it? How do you provide for affordability? How do you give them access? These are real issues that societies are able to be ahead of the curve, should be able to, because as I said, change happens at a faster speed. This is not a cell phone anymore. This is far better computer than any rockets which went to the moon. Far, far ahead of it. It does everything for us, right? It's a bank, it's a post office, it's a calendar, it's a camera, it's a music system, it's a movie theater, it's everything. Did we know it? No. Alan Toffler said it in 1970. We believed him till 1990, then we forgot him, right? Because the change is very difficult to predict, and therefore society which is nimble enough, not so much to predict the change as to react to the change, and where possibly be proactive enough to then slightly make the deviations to suit their natural strengths. And that is what I think COVID is telling us, that this is what really our leaderships should be driving at, should understand, and should prepare our systems for. The economics will follow that. I think we've had 5 very, very good, very interesting people, a good conversation where we gave them enough room to get into explanatory modes. Because for us, it is better to understand how things work elsewhere and not just in our neighborhood. How do you have an education system with a strong university system, a strong research system, and yet how do they interact together? And these are the kind of lessons that we really need to understand, and how to bridge the various divides. So Rao Saab, I think I should thank WHC and its partners for organizing this and for getting us people from Buenos Aires, from Boston, from Chicago, from Ashburn. Can you switch off your mic, madam? And of course from Delhi itself. So all of us get together, listen and understand from each other, and learn that, yes, Raj, money can be very awkward. I lived in Fairfax County. Its education budget 20 years ago was $1 billion a year. Many states would not have that. So obviously, equity is a major concern. As a human rights thing, it is a very, very important concern. But how do you balance it out and how do you carry people? That is the challenge ahead for us. So thank you very much, Rajasthan, Surbhi,
Yes,
and all our
let's
panelists.
move to the vote of thanks. Actually, I am actually going to propose the vote of thanks.
Please do. I'm done.
Okay. So distinguished chair, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end of this session, it is my great honor to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of WPC. I would like to express our gratitude and sincere thanks to Mr. Shakti Sinha for accepting our request to chair this session. We would like to extend our sincere thanks to all the speakers for delivering such a comprehensive and insightful presentation. We are honored to have all the speakers with us here today. We would like to acknowledge our gratitude to our friends from the diplomatic community, experts, academia, media, and different organizations. Last but not the least, I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for our audience who have participated in the webinar and those who are watching us live. We are truly honored to have you with us this morning and hope to stay connected with you in future as well. So as we come to the end of this day as well as our today's sessions, I request all of you to kindly join us for the further sessions tomorrow. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Join us tomorrow as well. Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you. Thank you, Shakti sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ivan Pacheco. Sorry.
Pacheco.
It was a wonderful session. We are answered with all our questions we had in our minds,
Yes,
and
yes,
the reviews
yes.
were really great.
He had a question unanswered, right, Royston? One of your questions remained unanswered.
No, actually, yeah, only about the taboo, but that's okay. That's all right.
You can mail her.
Thank you, Dr. Daniela, for coming and speaking national nutrition.
Chalo, bye-bye.
Bye-bye, sir.
Daniela, adios.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Adios.
Bye. Bye. Shakti sir.
Bye.
Or
all WPC team and volunteers, please stay back.
Just 1 minute. Just 1 minute.
Wait.
Let me stop this live streaming.
Yeah.
आप कौन है होस्ट कर रहा है Surabhi, you do that. Stop the live streaming